27, 2020. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, and the Kerr County Commissioners Court is now in session. And if you would, please rise for the prayer and the pledge.
Pray with me, if you will, please. Dear Lord, thank you for all the blessings we have in Kerr County. Be with those who are suffering from the hurricane in South Texas. Please consider more rain for us. Be with all those that protect us here domestically and at foreign. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Be seated. Okay, for those wishing to call in for any public input, I have my telephone here at the bench, and that number is 830-792-6161. So let me repeat that again, 792-6161. Okay, the next part of this, the agenda, it deals with public input, and this is for those that would like to address the court on a matter that is not on the agenda. If it is on the agenda, we ask that you wait until that agenda item is called. If there's anyone that would like to do that, would like for you to approach the podium, give us your name and address, and limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Does anyone want to offer any public input at this time? Okay, there being none, then we'll go to commissioners' comments.
We got an inch of rain in precinct 1. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Good for you.
Eat your heart out.
Yeah.
I bet it wasn't the whole precinct.
Most. Yeah, we did good. We
Yeah.
did good, so we're
Yeah,
happy with
good.
it.
We didn't get that much, but
We didn't either.
We have more fun in precinct 1 too, by the way. So.
It's because it's
More,
wet.
more rain and more fun.
because it's wet. Precinct 2.
Nothing.
Okay. 3.
Glad to be back. I
Welcome back.
get asked a lot how I feel, and as I mentioned on the phone, I was totally asymptomatic. I never knew I had it. The only reason I knew that I ended up with COVID is because my wife insisted I get tested because she got tested. And she was almost asymptomatic. But anyway, evidently I had it. Didn't know I had it. Hope I didn't infect anybody.
Good deal.
That's good. 4.
Missed out on the rain. We had high hopes, but got none. But I do want to recognize somebody. We're always talking about team players in the county and what have you. And Kerrville's fire department's 2 brush trucks went down there. And Mountain Home, Brian Alexander and his crew have loaned them one of theirs for the time being till they get theirs back up and running. And it's good to see cooperation like that. So
Good.
Hats off to Mountain Home Fire Department.
Good. Anything else? Okay, then let's go to the first item on the agenda, which, as it's been now for several months, is 1.1, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action regarding the update, facility use, and other matters related to COVID-19.
And I passed out your Doug Thomas could not be here today. He's got some plumbing issues at his residence he's having to deal with this morning. But so he called me yesterday afternoon. I did have him send me a report that I passed out to each one of y'all. I think one of the biggest things on that report that's notable is a week ago, it showed Kerr County having current active infections of 244. And I think DSHS has finally started rolling some of those off, and Doug and Danny Smith, the fire chief, been working with that. So now from DSH, our active cases are 50. And there is only 1 death, and the other one's under investigation. Back under investigation.
That's happening all around the state.
That's notable. But other than that, I think the report speaks for itself.
Okay.
I have a question, and maybe, I don't know if you or maybe even Commissioner Letts can tell me. When you get tested, are you automatically tested for the virus as well as antibodies, or?
No.
Okay.
2 separate
They're
tests.
2 separate tests.
2 separate tests.
And depending on where you are and how they'll do it, they have a a rapid antibody test and a rapid COVID test, and then they have a weak antibody test and a weak COVID test. I say weak, it's usually less than that. But they're different tests. A lot of times, if you test negative on the COVID, then they'll do the antibody if you request it, but it's not standard.
Okay. And they're testing for COVID and not corona.
They don't know what they're testing for, a coronavirus. They cannot differentiate on the testing that I was under. I had two different tests. They could not differentiate between the COVID and another coronavirus.
Well, that's just some of the questions I've been getting. I mean, everybody's a little confused on exactly what's taking place, and the numbers are all over the place. And, so, okay.
Everything I hear is, and I've talked with Peterson too, that they're going to be getting, they don't have already, the rapid test, and that's a huge help. Having to wait a long time, I was able to get a rapid test, or in fact my whole family got it the same day, just to make sure we were all finally clear. And it took 10 minutes, and then they did the other two boys, they did the antibody test as well. So that was done in Bernie. There's a facility there that can do the rapid test, urgent care clinic there. But I know that when I talked to Peterson last, thought they were going to get the rapid test pretty soon. I'm not sure if they have it yet. I'm not sure.
And for those who are interested, there's a lengthy article by Harvey Reich from Yale University Medical Research Department. He teaches epidemiology, and he's a staunch advocate of the hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, and zinc. Those three together, and he says we don't have to worry about waiting for a vaccine. We're covered. We're good right now, and he is perplexed at why that information is being censored. And there are even
Politics.
there are even doctors that are fighting to keep their medical licenses because they prescribed it and told others about it, and they've been attacked. So when you have somebody that's that high ranking, and this information continues to come out, and he's questioning this, and you can find it in Newsweek magazine. So we don't have to be as frightened about it as everybody is.
Well, the good news is that and I think this goes nationwide, the deaths are down substantially percentage-wise. I'm sure a lot of people. And it's just, it'll be really interesting someday when they find out what causes some people to be like I have, which is zero symptoms. Some people that have mild symptoms, and some people that have, it's death. And but it's
Well, you're healthy. People that aren't healthy have
some people that are healthy though. That I know some that have having a rough time that are healthy. But the good news is that they have a much better way of working it in the hospital, whether they do blood transfusions with the antibodies or they do the various tests that you were talking about. A lot of different things. And one of the reasons that Karen May had a very mild case is that they thought she had a sinus infection. They gave her a Z-Pack right away. And that might have minimized her. But we were very fortunate.
Well, yeah, before you leave, Sheriff, let me clarify what I understand to be the major change in these numbers of recoveries. Is you'll recall that we've had trouble counting our positive cases and probable cases between PRMC and DSHS. And then we have the Texas Military Force do their testing, and then we have the testing that we did over at the Ag Barn and all of this stuff. Last week, Chief Danny Smith and Dub Thomas, our emergency management coordinator, made a concerted effort to get with DSHS and reconcile these numbers so that we've got more accurate numbers. And so it's not that we suddenly had 200 people recovered in 1 week. We finally managed to catch up with the numbers. The big issue was that the contact tracing that DSHS does got severely behind. And because of that, the numbers remained inflated because they weren't able to clear people because they weren't able to complete their contact tracing.
Well, you don't have to put them down as assume positive either. Just
Well,
because they've had contact with somebody. The real problem is how they did the process in the first place. Not that they couldn't track people down, but that you assume that they have the virus because they had contact. That's a broad assumption.
Well, I can't speak to how DSHS did it. If you know better, then
I'm
tell
just
us.
saying that you jump to conclusions, and you're a lawyer. You're not supposed to jump to conclusions.
Commissioner, I didn't jump to a conclusion.
No,
telling
I'm
you,
saying
this
what-
is what Chief Smith and Doug Thomas told me.
I'm not talking about you, I'm saying that this process, people assume, two people living in the same house, one is assumed to have it if the other one tests positive. That's the way they've been writing this stuff down. So what you just described there is that we have to back off of it and figure out that just because these people were part of the contact tracing, they had to eliminate those, and it took a while for us to get those 200 extra people off the list. It's because, as far as I can tell, because there was an assumption.
Well,
Because of the
I don't know
contact
about that. All I know is that I'm very, very appreciative of what Chief Smith and Doug Thomas did this past week. It was a massive effort to try to get these numbers cleared up for us. And so I think what we're looking at now are probably the most accurate numbers that we have.
And I think what we ought to really look at for us, if you look at Doug's report just real quick, the total tests that have been given in this county was 5,462. Of that 5,462, 340 were positive. And right now,
6%.
and right now, we only have 50 active. And I think that's pretty good stats for the county.
Which is less than 1%.
I think the reporting thing is, I've been in contact with the SHHS, so I can kind of explain it. They didn't care where I thought I got it. They didn't care. They didn't ask me any questions about household, family. All they said, you have it. I said, yeah, I'm now tested positive. Okay, thank you. Or negative. They didn't ask any questions. It was almost a verification that I had the test. And so I think a lot of the numbers, a lot of the graphs show how you got it. They're not even asking the questions anymore. At least they didn't ask Karen or I, two of us, how we got it. And the other thing that I made this comment, I got then hit in the paper again for making the comment last week about the reporting numbers. I just don't know how it's all being done. I've been tested in Kerr County, Kendall County, and Montgomery County. I don't know how they're, they must have a really good database to be cross-referenced in my county I live in. And you look at my address, I'm being put in Kendall County, where I live in Kerr County. So Karen was in Gillespie, Kerr, and Kendall. She's been tested. So I think I don't put a whole lot of emphasis on the numbers. I think the trends are important. If we're getting more cases and the hospital occupancy rate or number of people with COVID in the hospital, to me that's a very important number. I think deaths is an important number. But trying to track down as to where you got it and all that, and who's probable and who isn't probable, doesn't make
I think you said the right thing, trend.
Right.
The trend is important.
Do plus or minus 5% on any numbers, just look at the trend.
Yeah, the trends are important.
Such as with Jonathan, one employee that I had that did test positive, 14 days later, they did get a call from DSHS. They would never call about where they'd been, who they'd been with, or, anybody. They've been seeing doctors on other issues too. But 14 days later, they get a call from DSHS saying, okay, don't have to be under quarantine anymore. Well, that same day, that person was retested and tested positive again. So 3 days later, after they were released from quarantine, they were put back in it again for another. So I think it is all over the place. But I think Kerr County numbers are now that Doug and Chief Smith have worked on it, and with DHI, I'm pleased to see where they are, and I'm pleased to see that we're less than 1% of positive. That's a good thing about the county.
Well, and I just want to reassure the public that I think we finally have some data that we can really rely on. It's been a major effort last week trying to get these numbers reconciled. And so 50 active cases, less than 1% test positive. What'd you say, Commissioner, 6%?
6%.
are accurate. I think those are accurate numbers.
Reiterate, even though I think the governor's order is unenforceable by a lot of different reasons, including the Texas County District Attorney Association believes the same thing, the attorneys do. I don't want us to lower our guard. I have policies where all my employees wear masks, and I think everybody should still be wearing masks and get through it, but I just can't enforce that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. Next item on the agenda, we've been doing this every week now for the past several months, is 1.2. And this is to consider, discuss, and take appropriate action on whether or not we want to terminate the stated disaster order that I entered back in March. And the language of the order has been that it will continue in effect extended until terminated by order of the court. So this is the opportunity the court has to discuss whether or not you're ready to terminate that order.
Nope.
As long as we're incurring expense, we should leave it open.
I can well agree with that. So let's move on to 1.3. Consider, discuss, and take appropriate action for the court to authorize the county engineer and Tetra Tech to advertise for bids for construction of phases 2 and 3 of the Center Point wastewater collection system project as funded, yada, yada, yada. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Judge.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Phase 1 of the project is very near completion.
And you have Mr. Don Berger with you, is that right?
I do. Don Berger
Yeah,
is
I recognize him.
here.
I can still recognize him with the mask.
And Don Berger is with Tetra Tech Engineering, or our consultants. The construction plans for phases 2 and 3 are complete and are ready for being bid. And I'll let Don walk through the schedule, but in a nutshell, we're asking the court authorization to advertise for bid for phases 2 and 3 of the project. Don can give us some background.
Yeah, so phase 1 of the project was fairly extensive. It was the largest phase of the project, and it set the basic infrastructure in place to serve Center Point area and eastern Kerr County with sewer service. And so phase 2 and 3 are extensions of that. Phase 1 was limited in its scope due to the funding that we had available at the time, but we do currently have funding available to complete both phases 2 and 3 in place through the Water Development Board and funding through the Texas Department of Agriculture. So the proposed schedule for phases 2 and 3 is to advertise these by the end of this month, by the end of this week, and then advertise again next week, and have a bid opening on August 27th. Following the bid opening, tentatively we would plan on bringing the contract award to Commissioners Court in September 14th meeting, your first regular meeting, and then begin construction as soon as we can following that. The only caveat with setting a hard date to begin construction is that once we receive the bids, there's a stack of paperwork that we have to send to the Water Development Board. A lot of it comes from the low bid contractor who we want to make the award to, and we have to get all of that paperwork together to the Water Development Board and have them approve it before we can actually start the construction so that they can release the construction funds.
So they've authorized it but not appropriated, right?
Right. It's been basically the money sits in sort of an escrow account, if you will. And so before they can begin releasing funds from an escrow account, they have to have certain I's dotted and T's crossed with regards to MWBE participation, making sure that the contractor will follow Davis-Bacon requirements for fair wages, fair labor standards, and all of the federal requirements that come along with the monies that we are using to finance the project.
Ask Don to kind of put this thing in perspective. Like in phase 1, there were approximately 400 septic systems eliminated.
That's correct.
Phase 2 and phase 3, there'd be another 400, 250 and 150
That's
ballpark.
right.
So that's huge, okay?
Yes.
And that's protecting the water of the streams and the Guadalupe River and all that, so.
Right. First and foremost, our goal here is protecting public health.
Right.
And so having septic systems that malfunction because there are lots that are not sufficiently large to handle those types of systems is one of the primary issues that we have in that area. And so that is a health hazard as well as a water quality hazard to the Guadalupe River.
So in summary, we've got the funds from Water Development Board and TVA authorized, not appropriated until they see how the documents play out.
Right.
Who's got it? So with that, I'd move for approval to authorize the county engineer and Tetra Tech to advertise for bids for constructions of phase 2 and phase 3 of the project.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Moser, seconded by Commissioner Letts, to approve to authorize the advertising for bids to begin construction of phase 2 and 3, Center Point wastewater line, East Kerr County. Any other discussion on this one?
What-
Can I just clarify, John, you said bid opening on August 27th? Does that need to be in court because that's a Thursday? Or does it?
No, that does not have to be in court. The award has to be in court.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, do you anticipate DeSoto bidding on phase 2 or 2 and 3?
I think they probably will.
Any further discussion? Those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous, 5-0. Thank you, Don, for coming in.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, we've got a timed item at 9:15. 1.4, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action regarding the Kerr County Joint Airport Board budget for FY 2021.
Thank you, Judge. I have with me board member Stephen Schmerbeck and...
Introduce yourself, Mark.
This is Mark Mosier, President of the Airport
Mark
Board,
Mosier, President of the...
and Stephen Schmerbeck, who's one of the new board members of the board.
Pardon?
And Stephen Schmerbeck, who's one of the new board members.
That's correct. And Mary Laura, our airport manager.
Almost didn't recognize her with the mask. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Before you, I have our paper PowerPoint. I always like starting out with our brag sheet. This, the colorful one comes from the Texas Department of Transportation Aviation Division. This is for 2018, and it shows they have a multiplier calculation that they say that because of the airport, our community receives $38.3 million. Now, that's based on jobs and some activity. Some activity cannot be measured at the airport, such as the hobby ranches and things. You know, they spend a lot of money. That's hard to measure, I'm not sure. They just don't measure that. But jobs are reduced, obviously, for Mooney, and so we figured you take about a third off that at worst. We hope those come back. Operating revenues is an interesting history. My background personally goes back to 2012 at the airport board in one capacity or another. And even prior to that, Tom can remember that the city and county were collectively contributing about $450,000 to keep the airport out of the red. And this goes back to 2015. The contributions or the top number in 2015, we were getting $94,957, and of course that's gone down. The goal of the board, Steve King led the board mainly for about 11 years at that time, was to be revenue neutral, and that's an admirable goal. I sometimes think we shot ourselves in the foot a little bit because we weren't spending much money, if any, on maintenance. So we're learning a lot about that right now, playing catch up. We have a lot of expenses, let alone some capital advancements we'd like to do. But fuel flow, you know, we're a little concerned about fuel flow right now. Fuel flow is our biggest hit we're going to get from COVID. And in the big picture, it's not that large of a percentage of our revenues, but still it's there. We're not recession proof. You know, most of our income comes from our rentals, and we do have a waiting list for rentals. I'm not too concerned about that. If this continued long term, then it could change something. But I really don't see that being a high risk. So I think most of our revenues are really protected. We've done a lot of things smart. We've converted a lot of properties to rentals. We're trying to use everything we can. I call it organic growth, take which we have, we've had to be viable. We still have a little room to move up in that area, which we're actively pursuing right now to create some more rental areas. We've had a lot of lost opportunities from businesses that have wanted to come here, and we don't have a place for them with employees. That's another goal we're trying to work on also. Operating expenses have been fairly consistent over time. And I have before you a balanced budget. And this year, we have a lot to spend on. We've discovered a lot of expenses. We have a very expensive crosswind runway, which is extremely valuable.
I hate to interrupt, Mark. I don't have that.
It's in the backup.
It's in the back there.
Okay, gotcha.
And we have an amazing board. I mean, I'm supported by an amazing team. We have the best civil manager in the state. We're truly a strategic board. Everybody brings a skill to the table. Gets more interested in the meeting, but we have a good outcome in the end. Everybody has a rush mentality on the board. They just want to give it their all. We put a lot of time into it. It's almost like we're an executive management team, but really not. We're truly a board, but we behave somewhat as an executive management team because we're willing to put our time into it. I appreciate the involvement of Tom and Jonathan very much. It's been very helpful. We look forward to the coming year and more involvement from you. Questions?
I had a chance to sit down with the board and go through the proposed budget, and I think Jonathan did as well. One of the things we discussed, which I think we need to put on the table, is fund balance. Okay? I think when we discussed it, the airport had a fund balance of $666,000. That's item number one. Item number two is city and county. In this budget, I think you still have $25,000 ramp grant.
Grant match, yes.
Okay. So the 800-pound gorilla in the room says,
Thank you for bringing that up. I
okay,
mentioned earlier,
why can't we eliminate the
we're spending money
$25,000?
as fast as we can right now. And if we could spend all of our, if we could fix all of the areas at the airport that need to be repaired, I'm not talking about building anything new, well, negative fund balance. We have extreme expenses out there right now to deal with. And that's the gorilla in the room to me. And the biggest one is across the runway, the 2-inch overlay. The Brickman hangar hasn't had any maintenance done since 1980 when it was built. And we're getting sticker shock on door repairs, operator repairs, roller repairs. Now we want to rebuild the whole frame, structure. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. We have some really key tenants in there. The paint hangars, we only have 10 places for corporate-sized aircraft in the entire airport that the airport controls, 10. And 6 of those are inside the Brickman hangar. Granger has half of those, Donald. And, the paint hangar is 4 of those. So that's our corporate airspace for storing corporate aircraft that we have. That's it. Joy and Kennedy has a few share areas. But
So
my point is we have more expenses than we have funds.
So just for the record, for the ballpark, the things you're talking about, redoing the runway on the cross runway, what are those 3 things amount to?
We're still learning.
700,000.
700,000 for the crosswind runway.
Yeah.
We had approval for box hangars and trying to get more corporate aircraft use jobs, businesses. That's the bottom line. I can give examples and examples. So we want to renovate the paint hangar, just bring it back to spec. That's $125,000. Bring the hangar improvements. Well, we started at 125, and it could be 300 now. It's going up.
So you've got maintenance and operations
Yes.
out there. You got $1 million
Easy.
in there.
Easy.
Okay.
And that's
Okay.
not even
So what
building
you're
new.
proposing is leave the fund balance where it is.
We're taking it down.
Keep the fund balance, and also have the ramp grant from the county for $25,000.
This year, Jonathan had an amazing, thank you, Jonathan, had a really good suggestion, which we are following through with, and we're gonna do some meetings, we call it 2x2. You two, city, the people that are involved, and talk about another way to do this. So I'm not coming to you every year saying, well, ramp grant, but it also allows us to do some further development.
Okay. Well, with that, I don't have any other questions. I move for approval of the budget as presented.
I'll second the question.
Let me state it. The motion's been made by Commissioner Moser, seconded by Commissioner Letts, to approve the budget as presented by the airport board. Go ahead.
Well, I was, this is a tough year. I mean, for all of us and everybody out here. And, is there anything we can cut back on this year? I mean,
You
that's
mean
what we've been
next year?
asking everybody. Well, the coming year, yes, sir, in the budget. And, we were nickel and diming the VFDs last week, and some of the others come in, and it's just slam dunk. Has every avenue been looked at to cut back? I realize some things haven't been improved since 1980 or whatever, but this is this is going to be a tough year. We don't know where we're going to be at 6 months from now.
I think
in this pandemic and everything, the economy.
It's not that if the Brinkman hangar becomes unfunctional, we lose our revenue. We're going in the opposite direction. So I think a lot of the things that need to be taken care of, and I think that the meeting, the 2x2, whatever you want to call the meetings, was to, I believe that we need to start a capital fund for the airport and put a certain amount of that fund balance into that fund, because last year we had $600,000 in our budget for airport improvements. We didn't spend any of it, which was that money came back into our general fund. So we had a huge amount in various reasons. But it's really difficult for the county, and I presume for the city, to go up and down on this funding there year to year. It'd be so much better if we could fund $100,000 a year into a capital line, because we know we have projects there. We have $1 million in maintenance items. We have T-hanger project. We have other things. And if you build, it's one of those things that's a cliche, but if you build it, they will come. It has happened. Every time we build T-hangers, we fill them up right away. And then all of a sudden our revenue starts going up, and that's a 90-10 grant, 80-20.
90-10.
90-10. So, we need to keep, not get too picky on any one year. We need to get a long-range plan for that airport, in my opinion. And that's what he was.
Ron makes a good point, though. If you have something that hasn't been improved or fixed since 1980, this is not a really good year to decide we're going to do it. It's been going on a long time, and now everybody's hard hit. But I think it would be good to explain to our taxpayers why the county, the volunteer fire departments that Don mentioned, we're not required to provide any funds for them. The airport may be a little different, so maybe you can explain that, Judge.
Well, we're half owner of that airport.
We're half owner.
We've got to take care of it.
We're required to take care of it, and there's some things we might jeopardize our tech stop money and other things if it's not done right, correctly.
That is correct.
So I like the taxpayers to know this stuff.
Sure.
Because they look and they go, you won't give 25 grand to the fire department, you're gonna give 500 grand to the airport. Well, it's a different animals, apples and oranges.
There's millions of dollars in grant transfers. There is a federal law that says all dollars that are generated on airport will stay on the airport. Thank you.
So, I think we can look at it. I think there's a little bit of time left in our budget,
Right.
but I think that because of my quarantine situation, made it really difficult for us to try to get together the last couple of weeks.
Nobody wanted to be around.
Nobody wanted to be around me. It was fun. That's happened. But, I know Commissioner Mosher talked to the airport board. I talked to the airport board about that 25,000 ramp grant, whether it should come out of it. But I think that's in the long term, it's a short-sighted because of the expenditures they do have coming up.
And it is a match. It's $100,000 total, we get $50,000 from the tax DOT as part of their law.
Well, I agree with you, Jonathan, that this should be something that's steady.
Yeah.
We should build in a fund for that and not do this up and
and
down,
down.
and that will help you guys.
It would give us more time
Sure.
to pursue things we need to pursue.
Let's make a plan.
Better planning that way.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, the motion before the court is to approve the budget. Any other discussion? Those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Abstained. So it's 401. Let's move on to item
Thanks,
one.
Mark.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you, Stephen, for coming in. And Mary.
Good job.
Okay, I'm looking for Tara. We got to get these people out before she gets in.
She's out there, I saw.
She told me she'd come.
Morning.
1.5, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action regarding the Upper Guadalupe River Authority river cleanup volunteers possibly using the Hill Country Youth Event Center dumpster. Tara Bushnell.
Good morning,
Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tara Bushnell for Guadalupe River Authority. We redesigned our river cleanup this year to not hold a single day event, so we're offering supported cleanups for volunteers from now through the end of October. And I was just trying to identify additional areas in the community that they were authorized to dispose of their trash. So we have the UGRA dumpster, I've arranged some locations with the city, and we were hoping to use the dumpster at the Hill Country Youth Event Center. They've been instructed that has to fit in the dumpster, and any larger items would come to UGRA. And I spoke with Commissioner Mosier and with Jake, and we're going to let you know if there's any issues with this moving forward.
Tara and I talked last week, and with the program she's got UGRA set out for cleanup, it's spread over a long period till November, I believe, Tara. And they had people working this past weekend, so they need a place to put things. So I talked to Jake. Jake said there was no problem with putting the stuff in one of the dumpsters out there. So we said, I stuck my neck out and said, okay, for this week, but now to come to the court and get approval to do that in the future, continue that way is what the agenda is.
So you want us to ratify your authorization?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, if not, I'll go pick up the garbage. Yeah.
We're teasing.
Yeah, I understand. So that's it. So Tara, was it used this past weekend, do you know?
I think so. A group was planning to clean up near the low water bridge at Legion Drive, and then also a little bit on Riverside Drive, and so we talked about that being the closest location, and so they were either going to take it there or to the UGRA dumpster, but I didn't confirm, if they had done that or not. But.
So it's we talked about the sewer system and what we're doing to protect the river, and this cleanup is extremely important. So the thing is, I will make a motion that we allow UGRA to use one of the dumpsters as long as it's compatible with what the Hill Country Youth Exhibit Center can accommodate. And I think there'd be some other plans if we need to do that. I mean, maybe that, maybe it needs to have an additional dumpster or something, but right now that's not the case. So with that, I would make a motion that we use the one dumpster out there on an as needed, but consistent with the needs of Hill Country Youth Exhibit Center. And if not, we'll come back to the court.
I'll second that, but I'm going to ask you a question about the larger items, the ones that won't fit.
Right.
So if somebody finds a refrigerator in the Guadalupe River, they're going to take it to the UGR parking lot?
Or parking lot, yes.
Okay.
And then we have an arrangement for it to be taken to the dump.
And that's in the rules when they sign up, or
Yes.
they're going to be well aware of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further discussion? There's been a motion made by Commissioner Moser, seconded by Commissioner Ballou, to authorize the use of the dumpster out at the Hill Country Youth Event Center for the UGRA River cleanup. Those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous, 5-0.
Thank you.
Don't leave.
No.
Got two more. 1.6, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action to authorize Texas Parks and Wildlife Department contractors to spray for, am I saying this right? Arundo Donax? Good. On Kerr County property. We went through this last year.
We have for the past couple of years. So the Healthy Creeks Initiative is a Texas Parks and Wildlife program to manage giant cane or Arundo Donax, and we've had properties in Flat Rock Park and also over at the baseball fields, as well as right-of-ways on county roads that have been treated during the past 2 years. We just wanted the opportunity to continue that program. It takes a couple of treatment years to really kill it for good. And I coordinate with Shane Evans with maintenance for the county properties, and then with Kelly Hofer and Road and Bridge for the right-of-ways, to specify the exact locations that'll be included.
And this one is the request to spray.
Yes, sir.
And then we're going to come to the next one here in just a minute, right?
Yes.
I move for approval, Judge.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Letts, seconded by Commissioner Harris, to approve spraying for the Arundo Donax on Kerr County property. Any further discussion? Those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous, 5-0. Let's move on to 1.7. Consider, discuss, and take appropriate action to allow Texas Parks and Wildlife Department contractor to fill water tanks at the Hill Country Youth Event Center for the Healthy Creeks Initiative program to manage the giant cane Arundo Donax.
This is also another item that was brought before the court in previous years. So the contractors, they come for about a week and they'll try to treat all the properties that we have, that UGRI staff has mapped, and identify the location. And so they have just in a trailer a water tank that they need to mix the herbicide with. And it's about 300 gallons is what they used last year. And so again, the UGRA parking lot spigot is their primary fill-up location. We would just like to provide an alternative location as well. I don't think they've ever used the water at the Hill Country Youth Event Center before, but it was an authorized location during previous years, and they have instructions to contact Shane via phone prior to coming for the first time in a year so he can verify the location.
I move for approval.
Second.
Motion been made by Commissioner Harris, seconded by Commissioner Letts to approve the use of the filling water tanks at the Youth Event Center for the Healthy Creeks Initiative Program. And let me just say, Ms. Bushnell, we are very proud to partner with the UGRA on all these projects. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your support.
These are pretty much no-brainer requests for approval, but
Well, I felt it was good to come to, since we were asking for several things, so I appreciate it very much.
so is there any other discussion on this topic? Okay, those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous 5-0.
Thank you.
Tell Ray hello for us.
I will. Thank you.
Okay, 1.8. I saw a tax assessor collector out there somewhere. Consider, discuss, and take appropriate action to approve a new optional $1.50 child safety fee for 2021 vehicle registration. Mr. Reeves.
Good morning, gentlemen. Judge, could you call the next item?
Yes.
Then this one would be better understood after we have
Okay,
them first.
we'll call them both together. Let's just do all three of them. 1.9, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action to approve an optional $10 county road and bridge fee for 2021. And 1.10, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action to submit the annual county fee changes for FY 2021. So if you'll take the lead.
Thank you, Judge. If we pay attention to, I believe it's 1.8, is that the one on the $10 fund?
No, 1.9.
1.9, okay. 1.9 is held under section 502-401 of the Transportation Code. It allows the county to charge a fee not to exceed $10 when registering a vehicle. The $10 fee is dedicated to the County Road and Bridge Fund. During the 2019 calendar year, according to Texas DMV, Kerr County had collected $563,920, which went specifically to the Road and Bridge Fund. The fee must be approved prior to September 1 of each year and becomes effective as of January 1st. I have copied the information from the DMV handbook for your review, and I respectfully request that the court approve this $10 optional fee, which has been in effect for a number of years. Such fee would be effective January 1st, 2021, and after the approval, I will forward the court order to the Texas DMV.
Okay.
Bob, this is something we do each year, isn't it?
This one is, yes, that's correct, Commissioner. And the money is specifically dedicated to Road and Bridge.
Okay.
So let's take a specific vote on that one. This is 1.9.
I move for approval.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is made by Commissioner Harris, seconded by Commissioner Letts to approve the $10 fee for the county road and bridge. Any other discussion on that? Those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous 5-0. Okay, you want to go to 1.8 now?
The first one, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. This one is under section 502-403 of the Transportation Code, and it allows the county to charge a fee not to exceed $1.50 when registering a vehicle. This fee is dedicated to child safety. The fee must be approved prior to September 1 of each year, and it becomes effective on January 1st. The auditor called my office the other day inquiring about this. This would be a new fee. This fee would be divided between the county and the municipalities proportionally to population. The portion of this fee, and I talked to a colleague in Blanco County who uses this, they use this for in lieu of tax dollars for certain organizations, Child Services Board, like what Ms. Grinstead's own, CASA, other child-related safety fees. Kerr County would be able to retain 10% off the top, and then the rest would be proportionally divided between the two municipalities and the county according to population. I believe Ms. Shelton has some dollars and cents that she may want to explain to you.
Yeah. We estimated there were about 56,000 auto registrations last year. And so we only took that amount for 9 months because the fee will not go into effect until January. And so for the administration costs that Kerr County will keep, it's around $6,000. And we would also.
You say 6?
6,000.
That's that 10%.
That's the 10%. And then the Kerr County on the part that would be spent for the child safety would be $29,000. Kerrville would receive approximately $26,000, and the city of Ingram would receive approximately $2,000. In looking into what, in addition to what Mr. Reeves was saying, in addition to that, in speaking with the county attorney, we also looked at, it says that we can use it for the protection of the public and public safety. And so in using that, our juvenile probation department would also be counted in that. So we spend approximately $966,000. I'm just saying we have plenty of opportunities where we're spending that money.
But it's a new
This
tax.
becomes earmarked. This is a separate fund. This doesn't go in the general fund. This is for a specific purpose.
It goes into the general fund for specific purposes, yes.
So,
Because we're spending more money than.
yeah, how do we
we'll
keep
be
track?
receiving.
How is that maintained? How do we keep track of that?
Whenever we're looking at the budget, we'll be pulling that revenue in, and then we'll just be knowing what it can be spent on and making sure that we're spending that money for those purposes.
But it's a new tax going in the general fund, which,
Which is earmarked for something else.
well, it's not earmarked.
Well, it sounds like it is.
No, it's
It
not
can
earmarked.
only be used for certain purposes.
It can only be used for certain purposes, yes, but not all of our funds that are earmarked go into a separate fund. We have quite a few funds that are earmarked, just like the $10 fee is in our general road and bridge.
Right.
And so it's got more specifics in there, but we know that we spend more money
It's like
than
keeping
that
receipts
on
to
those
show where it came
purposes. Exactly.
But you mentioned about 6 different things where this could be used.
Yes,
But bottom line, it's a new tax,
yes, sir.
I guess.
And also, part of this also comes under, in the April 2020 county progress, it was talking about county budget preparation under Senate Bill 2. And one of the recommendations in there was to look at all of your optional taxes, just because of the constraints that have been put on the property taxes.
And this isn't really a new tax. This is a user fee.
Well, it's a new tax.
No, sir, if I may, it's not a tax. It's added to your registration of vehicles. You don't have to be a taxpayer to register a vehicle. It makes no difference to my office if we collect it or not. I think this is, for the benefit of the constraints of property tax, a fee that we can utilize to add to it, just like the road and bridge is not a mandatory fee, but we utilize that $10 to fund road and bridge.
So user fee is what I call that.
A user fee, if you register a vehicle, naturally, the sheriff's fleet, road and bridge, any exempt vehicles, it's not charged. These, there's a number of them that aren't charged. But this is a fee, it's available for your consideration, and it makes no difference to my office. It's just a bookkeeping procedure that we'll do on each week of the report when we remit the money. But it's no more billings. The state calculates it when they send it out.
Now,
This-
that's
But this is a
6,000.
registration fee, just like a driver's license fee. It's not a tax.
Right.
It's a registration when you renew your sticker on your trailer, whatever you do.
Right.
It's an additional $1.50.
It's money
It's
out.
the thing, it's the thing that makes people say, it wasn't this much last year.
Yeah, I'll be getting that call.
Right. The $6,000 would be collected regardless. Well, it's an administration.
If we
you
don't
do.
collect it, we
I'm
don't.
saying, regardless, that goes back into the general fund, it stays in the general fund.
Right.
Yes,
For the trouble of collecting and distributing.
yes.
Okay.
If I may say, one of the other uses that I think that can be used with this, that we used to get from tax dot different organizations, and us in the city put on different clinics about it, was child safety seats, car seats, that are actually approved ones and not just hand-me-downs for people that can't afford them. Okay? And we would put on clinics that we would give out approved child safety seats, and those aren't cheap for people that can't afford them. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this type of fee can be used to purchase those seats that have them in storage for people that, for the.
Call it a tax or call it a fee, it's still additional funds that people have to pay.
It is.
All right, good. Okay.
Does the city of Kerrville, I presume they have uses for this as well?
Many of the cities use them for crossing guards, striping of crosswalks at schools, which I'm assuming that can be used for that as well.
Child safety is a
Child
pretty big
safety,
umbrella.
that's the buzzword there, Commissioner.
Which we're all for, and if they say it's for the children, everybody is afraid to vote against it.
I'd almost want it earmarked specifically, okay, it's gonna go to this, not that it could go for this.
Right, right.
So if we kinda had a plan, maybe, it'd be for it, but if we don't have a plan where it just gets lumped in and
It doesn't just get lumped in.
No, but we're gonna have to, if we do this, figure out where it's gonna go. And
Exactly.
I agree with Commissioner Mosier. I mean, it is still more money. It is, at a time when we're gonna be asking people, or our volunteer fire departments are gonna be asking to establish ESDs and all these other things. It
Right.
becomes the nickel and dime thing that people begin to resent, and it gets expensive all of it. Now, this is probably a once a year, maybe twice a year thing. $1.50 for each time I go in and get a registration, right?
That's correct.
per vehicle, so that's.
So maybe $3 a year, or 4 or 5, you know, in
How
the
many
case of some of
vehicles?
these guys that have fleets. How many vehicles do you have?
Way too many.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion, we approve this new fee, and I'll make a comment afterward, if I get a second. I mean, I'll get a second.
I'll second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Lentz, seconded by Commissioner Baloo to approve the $1.50 child safety fee for vehicle registration for 2021.
The comment I
Comments?
make is that, you know, property taxes is our big source, but there's a lot of people that don't own property, that own vehicles. And this is also a way to spread that out a little bit to help property owners. Well,
good point.
again, I think that it's, we use these types of fees throughout our budget. And, to me, it's a benefit.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? Those in favor, raise your hand. Those opposed, raise your hand. 3-2. Hotly contested issue. Now let's address 1.10 that I have to admit, when I read this on the agenda, I had to ask our boss, Jody, what I was doing. But this is a form that I have to fill out to send in to the DMV with regard to these fees that we just set.
Our my office in,
Yeah,
do need court orders
right.
to go with them.
So this is, I'll go ahead and make the motion that we, Bob and I are authorized to submit the annual county fee changes for the FY 2021 to the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles, and you'll see that form under tab 1.10 in our
Second.
materials. Okay, so I've made the motion, seconded by Commissioner Letts, to approve filling out the changes and sending them in to DMV. Any other discussion about that? Okay, those in favor, raise your hand. 5-0 unanimous. Okay, it's not quite 10 o'clock, which are our next series of timed items. So why don't we take about a 5-minute break and we'll come back at 10 o'clock. Back to order. We're now on item 1.11. It's a public hearing regarding the no parking signs installed at, is it Homelius Road East Bridge, Precinct 3. Kelly Hofer. Okay. This is a public meeting. I've now convened the public meeting. If there's anybody that is here that would like to speak on this, the no parking signs on Homelius Road, this is your opportunity. Is there anyone?
Anybody out here to speak on the public hearing on the road sign on Homelius Road? Nope.
Okay, then I'm going to adjourn the public meeting, and now let's move to item 1.12. Consider, discuss, and take appropriate action for the Commissioners Court final approval regarding no parking signs installed at Homelius Road Bridge, East Bridge, Precinct 3. Kelly Hofer.
Good morning. On May 17th, 2020, Chris Summers made a request to Marshall Heath at TxDOT regarding trespassing issues property owners were having along the Guadalupe River near Homelius Road East Bridge. Mr. Heath forwarded the information to Charlie Hastings, the Kerr County engineer. We spoke with Commissioner Letts on this issue and have decided to install no parking signs at this bridge. I have enclosed a map with sign locations. At this time, I ask the Commissioners Court for their final approval regarding the installation of no parking signs at the Homelius Road East Bridge and Precinct 3.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Letts, seconded by Commissioner Baloo, to approve the no parking sign at Homelius Road.
Yeah. I make a comment, and I think the reason I'm in favor of this is we've done it throughout the county many times, and I think that, you know, it's continued. But the other comment, there was a email that, I guess the whole court got, maybe, I'm not sure, maybe I just got it from either Charlie or Kelly, about how much we spend on signs, and whether we really need to look at our policy and narrow down, should we put signs as we are right now in situations like this, or should we follow the transportation manual and that's it? And
What do you mean that's it?
This may or may not qualify. I don't know if it would or wouldn't, but I know that we have a lot of signs up, curbs and speed limit. You know, we have a lot of unnecessary signs that we put up for all kinds of reasons, mainly because our constituents ask for it. But they're not technically required signs. They're signs because we want to put up a sign, or someone wants a sign put up. So anyway, I think we're going to look at those maybe sometime in the future because, you know, I'm just bringing this up because I think it's something that can't, I won't say it's getting out of hand now, but we're doing more and more signage all the time.
Well, this one's for safety, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how long it'll stay up, but I can tell you there's a bunch more of these that get taken down.
Yeah.
Right.
All over Kerr County.
Yeah.
There's a lot of maintenance with these signs.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm in favor of it because this is our policy has been to do things like that. But I think we need to look at that policy at some point in the future.
Okay. Any other discussion? Those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous, 5-0. Item 1.13, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action to set a public hearing regarding the removal of the road name of Padre Pio Drive West, Precinct 4. Kelly Hofer.
Mark Del Toro from the 911 office applied on July 8th, 2020 to have the existing road name of Padre Pio Drive West removed from the record. All of the road will be named Cummins Lane West, I believe. Mark is here so we can further discuss on this, which was named in 2010, and Padre Pio Drive West was never removed. Kerr County maintains Cummings Road West from Blue Ridge Road West to Ed's Way West, approximately 400 feet. The section from Ed's Way West to the end is not maintained by Kerr County and currently has a sign that states Kerr County maintenance ends. At this time, I ask the Commissioners Court to set a public hearing for Monday, September 14, 2020 at 10 a.m. And this is in Precinct 4. And if you have any questions, Mark Del Toro is here.
I move for approval.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Harris, seconded by Commissioner Moser, to set a public hearing for September the 14th at 10 a.m. With regard to removal of the road name Padre Pio Drive West. Any other discussion? Those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous, 5-0.
Thank you, Mark.
Item 1.14, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action for the Commissioners Court to set a public hearing regarding the installation of a stop sign at the intersection of Horizon Boulevard South and Shepherd Reese Road South, Precinct 1. Kelly Hofer.
We had a gentleman that came in, he actually came into the engineering department a week or so ago, and it said more than once when he was on Shepherd Reese heading towards the state hospital that somebody's coming out of the gate at Horizon, and as he puts it, they punch it to get ahead of them. And he said the second time he almost was hit. So I went back into the records because I couldn't believe that we didn't have any record of a stop sign at that location just because Shepherd Reese has got a lot of traffic on it, and I could not find anything. So kind of had to start from scratch on that. I talked to Charlie and Bobby about it in the engineering department, and they both agreed that there should be a stop sign there. We might have to do some additional marking because that entrance at the Horizon is so incredibly wide.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you where you're gonna put the sign, without some kind of stripes or something.
Right.
So can you stripe that?
Well, Stryker will do some sort of buttons or some RPM, raised pavement markers, something. But I did want to bring this, to the attention of the court, and it does take a court order in order to put up a regulatory sign. But I do think that this would be a very good location.
But this is to set a public hearing.
Yes, sir.
Move for approval.
And that public hearing would be Monday, September 14th, 2020 at 10 a.m. And this is in Precinct 1.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Letts, seconded by Commissioner Harris, to set a public hearing on the installation of a stop sign at the intersection of Horizon Boulevard South and Shepherd Reese Road South for September the 14th at 10 a.m. Any further discussion?
I think there was a song, signs, everywhere a sign, or something like that.
That goes back a way, Don.
Yeah, it does. Well, look at us.
Any other discussion? Those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous, 5-0. Item 1.15, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action for the Commissioners Court to approve the three Kerr County agreements regarding storage of Kerr County-owned materials on private property. This is in precincts 1, 2, and 4. Ms. Hofer.
We worked with the county attorney on this, and she had helped write up an agreement for us to be able to store paving rock, road base, various materials, and sometimes equipment. It's just getting harder and harder for us to be able to store things. It used to not be that hard, but I have before you 3 signed agreements from the property owners regarding temporary storage of Kerr County-owned materials and/or equipment on private property. The county attorney worked with Road and Bridge on this agreement for temporary equipment and material storage on private property. We try and store our materials within the county's right-of-way and/or county properties. It is becoming more and more challenging to find places that are close to the area that we are working on. All agreements are good for 1 year. The current agreements for today are as follows. 100 Ace Reed Road North. Thomas Brown is the owner. It's in Precinct 1, and it's paving rock. 240 Southway Drive, Grace Bible Chapel owner. Precinct 2, paving rock and equipment year-round storage. Actually, I think that's Precinct 1. 384 Kelly Creek Road, Cody and Vicki Fry are the owners. Precinct 1, paving rock. At this time, I ask Commissioners Court for their approval of the 3 Kerr County agreements regarding storage of Kerr County-owned materials on private property, and for the Kerr County judge to sign the same. These are in Precinct 1, 2, and 4.
I move for approval.
Let me ask a question, Kelly. These are all dated the same, they all went into effect.
Before we start talking about it, I got a second?
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made by Commissioner Harris, seconded by Commissioner Moser.
Sorry.
Please.
all of these contracts went into effect on the same day and they're now updating on the same day?
Whatever they were signed, I waited to get them all signed, and then I signed them, but instead of bringing one at a time, we tried to kind of group them, and then it got delayed, the location, and we ended up having the rock put somewhere else because we couldn't get the people to
So a year ago, we did all three, they commenced on the same day? You said these have to be.
This is the first time that we've done this,
Okay,
but
I didn't remember this,
Yeah.
so that's why I'm asking.
exactly.
Okay.
We did not do it last year.
Any other discussion? Those in favor of approving these three agreements, raise your hand. Unanimous, 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 1.17, clarification of the drainage requirements for the Meadowbrook Retirement Community Manufactured Housing Rental.
1-6.
1.6, okay, sorry. Public hearing, public hearing. This is a public hearing for the revision of plat for Spicer Ranch, lots 25 and 31.
Public hearing on 1-6. No, Your Honor.
Okay, there being no one to appear, then we will adjourn and go on to item 1.17, which is clarification of the drainage requirements for the Meadowbrook Retirement Community Manufactured Housing Rental Community Development Plan, Phase 1, located at State Highway 27 and Hoot Owl Hollow, Precinct 4. Charlie Hastings.
Thank you. Per the Local Government Code, Section 232.007C1, the court may establish minimum standards that may include reasonable specifications to provide adequate drainage in accordance with standard engineering practices, including specifying necessary drainage culverts and identifying areas included in the 100-year floodplain. On September 23, 2019, the court approved Order Number 37728, approve and grant a variance to the Manufactured Housing Rental Community Regulations stormwater detention calculation requirements, and instead require the Meadowbrook Retirement Community to reduce the stormwater flows for proposed conditions to a level that is equal to existing condition flows. The purpose behind this variance was to bring Kerr County's Manufactured Home Rental Community Stormwater Regulations into compliance with the local government code as it is related to reasonable specifications and standard engineering practices for the Meadowbrook Retirement Community. On February 24, 2020, the court approved Order Number 37968, approved the Meadowbrook Retirement Community Manufactured Housing Rental Community Development Plan, Phase 1, located at State Highway 27 and Hoot Owl Hollow. The county engineer's memo dated February 24, 2020 was read into the minutes and contained an error in reference to Court Order Number 37728 noted above. The error that was read into the February 24, 2020 minutes is found on page 83 and noted below. I'll read it. Line 13 and the Kerr County, beginning on line 13 and ending on line 17. And the Kerr County subdivision guidelines allow up to a 5% increase in post-development peak flows for residential drainage calculations, which were authorized to be used by the court in September of 2019. The corrected county engineer memo reads, although the Kerr County subdivision guidelines allow up to a 5% increase in post-development peak flows for residential drainage calculations, Court Order Number 37728, dated September 23, 2019, requires the Meadowbrook Retirement Community to reduce the stormwater flows for proposed conditions to a level that is equal to existing condition flows. Plans and construction shall be revised to reflect such conditions. This error was noticed by the county engineer on July 16, 2020, after a field visit to inspect stormwater erosion control at the Meadowbrook Retirement Community construction site, at which time the county engineer contacted the engineer for record of the project, John Hewitt, P.E., and the developer, Chris Mundall, to remind them of the condition imposed by the court through Order Number 37728. Both the engineer and developer agreed they would follow Court Order Number 37728 as it relates to storm drainage calculations, construction, and flow. Construction plans and drainage calculations are now being revised and will be reflected in the record drawings before final acceptance. In accordance with Section 1.03C of the Manufactured Home Rental Community Regulations, the steps for approval, construction, and a certificate of compliance are the following. 1.03C, construction of a proposed manufactured home rental community may not begin before the date the county engineer approves the development plan. The county engineer or commissioner's court may require inspection of the infrastructure during its construction and shall require a final inspection. The final inspection must be completed not later than the second business day after the date the county engineer receives an affidavit from the owner of the manufactured home rental community that construction of the infrastructure has been completed in accordance with the approved development plan. If the county engineer determines that the infrastructure complies with the development plan, the Commissioner's Court shall issue a certificate of compliance not later than the 5th business day after the date final inspection is completed. Because of the tight 5-day certificate of compliance requirement, the county engineer will likely place this item on a future court agenda that may not be a regular meeting, depending on the date of the final inspection, which is, at this time, is unknown. Construction began after February 2020, and it is currently about 50% complete, maybe a little bit more.
Order, I believe what Charlie said, 37728 was declared void by Judge Patillo on Friday, and so that item has been reposted appropriately for 12:30 today. It was posted for 12:30 because that was just about the time that the hearing wrapped up and you wanted to get it appropriately posted. So I recommend that you pass on this item for any further consideration until 12:30 when you're able to call the 1.25 addendum to today's agenda.
Well, I'll tell you, there has been a lot of people contacting me since Friday. And a lot of people were upset. I've had calls from people out of town on trips that couldn't be here that would like to speak on it. And they're out of town. They're out of the state. And it's my feeling for full transparency on this stuff, where everybody can talk, and I see a lot of people out here that want to talk, we should put this off past.
You can't really pass the 1.25 until you're able to call the 1.25 at 12:30. Because there could be people who may come at 12:30 ready to talk about it. So if you're going to pass on the 1.25, you could pass this one now to make that decision at 1.25 if you'd like to. But I think that to appropriately wait until the right time that you can actually call it at that timed item, you need to wait to have this conversation until that time.
At 12:30.
Yes, sir.
Pass on it then.
Okay.
I agree that you're right about the 1.25. What is it that is the 1.17?
The one.
Can we even do anything with that?
There's a lot of people here want to talk.
My agenda bill for 1.17 was to clarify an error and to make a correction in the records.
Right.
I'm not asking, it's just a clarification.
And that was from the February error, is that correct?
That's correct, from February.
So
1.17 has nothing to do with order 37728.
Well, there was an order, it was 37968, I think you said, Charlie.
Yeah, that's the.
That was in error?
That's the February 14 that's in error. Is that right, Charlie? I'm trying to understand what the issue is.
37968 is an error, but the error that we were trying to clarify was voided under that court order.
Yes.
So I don't know how that we can take action on this one because
There's no action required, is there?
well, there should. I mean, where the variance was granted is voided. Therefore, in my mind, it almost voids the other order as well because they're related.
Maybe, that might be the right answer. It may just take some cleaning up later, but that we can.
I think we need to go talk about maybe pass on this at this time, Judge.
I just want to make sure I understand what the issue is. In reading what Charlie read to us, which was the attachment in our materials,
Yes.
that originally what this court approved was a variance to reduce the stormwater flows for the proposed conditions to a level that is equal to existing condition flows?
Correct.
Yes,
Is that right?
That's correct.
And then it looks like the correction you wanted to make was to allow up to a 5% increase.
No, sir, I wanted to clarify that, that my
my memo that I read into the minutes in February was inaccurate. It had an error. And
Because it said up to 5%.
it said up to 5, and it should have said no increase at all.
So it's supposed to be equal to the existing flows.
Yes, sir.
And so there's no need to correct that at this point. Okay, that's the other order.
I thought it
That's the
was
968.
important for the community to know.
But
If
no
they
action
were
is
to
required.
have read in September of last year what the court approved, and then they read again what was approved in February, they would see that there is a difference between the two. There should not have been a difference.
But there's no action required.
Well, I think
It's a clarification, because there is some confusion on this issue, and when I noticed my memo from February of this year, I thought, that might be the confusion.
So
I
this
think actually-
court order needs to be rescinded.
What's the agenda?
Hold on one second.
I guess my confusion, or not confusion, I look at it as Court Order 37968 stands right now, and it stands with an error.
So it needs to be
So
rescinded.
it should be it should be clarified that the confusion then comes into my mind is because the order where we granted the variance to make it equal has been voided. So we can still clarify that 37968 should be equal, not up to 5%.
Well, I'm
That
trying,
changes stuff that's
But I
already
think-
been done. That's
Charlie, let me just ask you
closing
some
the gate
questions.
after the cow's out.
Yeah. Everyone's in agreement with that.
What was the application that was presented to us back in September of last year? Was that to have equal flows or an additional 5%?
I presented it that it be equal.
Okay.
Equal flow, pre and post development be equal, which
And-
would require detention.
Okay. And if it's equal, what is the variance? Is there any variance there?
Our regulations require, our manufactured housing rental community regulations are requiring that you detain more than what is leaving the site before you develop it.
5% more?
No, sir, 20% more.
20%
In
more?
the 100-year, 50% more in the 50.
So in essence, what was
5 year.
done back in September was a variance was granted to reduce or to actually increase the drainage by 20%.
Reduce the drainage by 20%. Reduce the
Detention.
required runoff
Right.
by 20%.
Right.
Our regulations right now, as they stand, I believe they're not reasonable. I think it was an error when it was written, and that's what I presented to the court in September.
Well, but before we get there, I'm just trying to get the baby steps here. What we approved was an equal drainage, right?
Yes, sir.
Equal to the existing drainage.
Yes, sir.
And the regulations at the time would have required it to be 20% greater than the existing drainage.
A reduction by 20% in the 100-year storm.
And so that's what we waived,
Over existing conditions.
because there would have been less drainage allowed if we had enforced the regulation at the time.
If we would enforce the regulations at the time, water would be detained and then probably released at the same time that the river is peaking and cause an adverse impact. So it's just not engineering practice, good engineering practice to do that. It
Well,
should be equal.
And I understand that, and that's probably where we're going to have to get on some of this stuff, but I'm just trying to figure out where we are today. The order that we approved in September of last year actually increased the amount of drainage that would normally be allowed into Johnson Creek.
Decrease the amount of drainage.
No.
You don't need a variance for a decrease. It was a variance, so.
And if you'll remember back then, y'all, and we've been having this conversation for a long time, we've been talking about changing our subdivision rules and regulations, which this one it needs to be tweaked because it doesn't, like Trevor said, it doesn't make any sense. However, we've been putting that off because of the coronavirus, and Chuck Kimbrough's has started work on it for us last year, and we were looking toward taking care of that in last November, and now here we sit.
Yeah, but still, what are we trying to accomplish here with this agenda item?
To clarify what happened in.
I think it'll be unclear when we,
Right.
after executive session.
Right.
I mean, the whole issue. I mean, it's a lot of interrelated things here. But I think you have to go back to, we have subdivision rules and we have manufactured home rules.
Right.
Our subdivision rules allow up to a 5% increase if you're a small subdivision.
That's correct.
The manufactured home rules, I'll go back in history, I almost want to say that what we adopted because we tried to model them after our subdivision rules and we got sued and lost. So we adopted the state rules, I believe.
And I think that what Charlie read into the record just a minute ago was that our mobile home park rules don't mirror state law, and so what he was trying to do with the variance was get it to comply with state law instead of the provision in it.
And what is state law?
State law is that we have reasonable regulations for drainage.
Well, that's clear as mud.
Yeah.
That follow engineering, standard engineering practice.
I mean, to me, and this is not really related to subdivision, when you do work on your property, you're not supposed to increase the drainage off that property.
That's right.
That's the model. I mean, that's what you're doing. Trying to say when you do something you have to decrease the drainage doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But that's what our rules currently say.
So you can take no action at this time, and then if you'd like to do
Well,
that.
but we got a lot of people here.
What action could we take?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Can.
Yeah. The action is to clarify that Court Order 37968 should have read no increase of runoff.
That's correct.
So we have to void a court order and have a new court order?
I would think that we should start over again.
You can revise your court order.
Okay.
Well, I'm looking at the court order, and all it says is that it approves their development plan, phase 1.
Right. And so the clarification is, but that order was based on the statement that was made in September, which was the variances granted to go up to the drainage runoff had to be equal.
Right.
Well, is there the revision then to say to reflect state law or to state what you just stated?
The revision would be, the clarification as to what happened was, it should go back to no increased runoff. Because that's what the variance that we talked about, that the thing that's clouded in my mind is that variance has now been, or the court order that did that variance is now void.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we can, I mean, but I think we could.
The error was only in my memo.
Right.
There was no error in the court order that you adopted in September
Well, that's what I think.
2019.
There's no error in the court order, so we don't have to do anything.
It's
You're
a
talking about
clarification of what my memo should have
But
been.
how is your clarification? It's just in a memo or something, right? We don't take any action on that.
Well, here's the problem.
Right.
The order that got voided is 37728. And
Right.
it says equal to existing condition flows. Okay? Stormwater flows from proposed conditions to a level that is equal to existing condition flows.
So that's voided.
And that's gone. So what do we have in place then?
We have our, we have
37968.
Okay.
Which is the order approving the plans.
And so what's on the plan?
a 5%, 3.5% increase.
Okay, and that's what the people are upset about is the 3.5% increase?
I believe so.
Okay.
Which is what required the variance. It was going to increase. So if we go back to just zero impact, nobody can complain about that.
Which is on, that decision is on 1.25.
I know. I'm saying, when you have zero impact, there's nothing to complain about then. So that's obvious the result.
And you're telling me I can't,
You can't pass on 125 yet until 12:30. Because you can't call it yet. Yeah.
Because it's time.
And that's a 72-hour rule. Okay, so just previews of coming attractions.
So so I understand this. Court order 37968 is sufficiently vague to leave alone.
Well,
I don't think it's vague at all.
It's not vague. We
No.
approved it, and the plat that came in that was signed had the 3.5% on it. And and the plat had that was an error.
Well, I should have said maybe sufficiently generic. So it didn't seem like it was terribly
The
specific.
plat was, some of the wording on the plat was an error.
So we don't have to take any action on that. The court order's in place, the 3.5% is in there.
But we don't want to do the 3.5%. That's not what the variance, our original discussion was supposed to be equal to.
Right.
That's what we did the variance on,
Okay.
and that was what, it was
No
just
variance.
missed on the plat before it got signed.
Okay, so we can't take any action on 37728, right?
No.
Okay, so forget about that. 37968 approves the plat that was submitted by the developer. And the calculations on that plat and the drawings on that plat increase the discharge by 3.5%.
Correct.
Now, can we just go back and revise the order to not allow the 3.5% since we never agreed to it to begin with? Isn't that the case?
I think we can. But I'll-
We didn't agree to the 3.5%, we agreed to equal. That's what got set aside. So we take this one that has the 3.5% in it, take the 3.5% out, it goes back to equal, right?
Right.
You're saying we didn't approve the 3.5% increase?
No.
What was the variance for?
The variance was to go to no increase.
Why do you need a variance for no increase?
Well, the other one, the 3.5 was an increase, it was allowing 3.5% runoff, increase in runoff. And the variance that what we wanted was to say, no, you can't have any runoff.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
think that this might be more helpful for y'all to wait to be able to really talk about the issues that 125 from the court voiding the order.
And I'm fine with doing that, but I'm trying to be considerate of the people that have taken their time to come down here and talk to us.
Without a doubt.
And as you know, you and I have a heavy juvenile docket at 1:30, so we have precious little time at 12:30 to hear all this. I think all but maybe one or two people that signed up wanted to talk on 17 and 25. So do we go forward and let the people talk about 17 even if the issues kind of spill over or not? What do we do?
Well, they're all here.
Well, the question I have is, maybe, I don't know if this is get rid of it or not. It's my question to the county attorney is, can we modify court order 37968 based on this agenda item?
How would you want to modify it?
I think you modified that the plat was an error when it said 3.5% increase. It should have said no increase.
So you're modifying the plat, not the court.
But the order is approving the plat.
The engineer is here.
Well,
Yeah, it doesn't,
It's actually a development plan, not a plat.
Right.
Same
And
thing.
I
the
see that.
development plan, it shows a 3.5% increase, and that was in error. It should have been 0.
And so the clarification that we coulda, woulda, shoulda made is to take away that 3.5% increase that was on that plan.
Right.
Yes.
On that development plan, and we didn't see it. It wasn't caught by Charlie or by anyone on the court. And
And the reason the court set aside the 728 has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now.
Correct.
So we're not flying in the face of some court order. We're just going back to fix this one that was properly noticed to get it back to equal flows.
Right.
I think we can do that.
Now, of the people that are here to speak, there may be some that can't come back at 12.
That's right.
I know, that's
Might
why.
be considerate to let them go ahead now.
without a doubt.
Say
I
that,
want
please.
everybody who wants to speak.
But I'm looking at my county attorney and I'm getting a head shake.
You got an item posted at 12:30, and you need to wait until 12:30 to discuss that item and to comply with the Open Meetings Act. Otherwise, you're gonna have the same people back here complaining about not having sufficient 72-hour notice. And I know they wanna talk right now, and they can talk on the item 1.17
Right.
if it relates to that specific issue, which is
Okay.
the 3.5.
At least get that 3.5% increase out of this order.
And so,
Okay.
but if, it would be, I know that they're here and their time is precious too, but if we're able to talk about it with the 72 hours later, you're gonna protect yourselves a lot more if you just wait to talk about it at 12:30.
people are here.
Well, the only thing that happened last Friday was that the court set aside the order because it didn't include the physical address of the subdivision. Okay? We're not talking about that. We don't have a problem with the 968 order, do we? It's in there. On that
And the
agenda item.
968, so something else I'm considering that Charlie may want to weigh in on here. The 968 order didn't even include what was approved in the variance, so the 968 order probably still stands just fine. But if you go back and modify the 968 order to say, we don't want more runoff, we want it to be what it was, then.
Well, the 968 order granted a variance.
No,
That's 728.
728.
728, I'm sorry, right. 728 granted a variance. That's right. And that's what got set aside.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there's no variance.
And the variance wasn't even included in the 968 plans that were submitted and approved, right?
That was the error. That was the
Right.
error.
That was an error.
You know, in the court order, the one that's still active, still in effect, it says approve the community development plan, phase 1. Doesn't have a date on it or anything else. Charlie looked at the plan and says, oops, it has 3.5% in there, it shouldn't.
Right.
So what we're talking about is modifying the development plan, not the court order. But it doesn't reference a date on that. So can Charlie modify a development plan without modifying the court order?
Well-
Seems to me like that's all it's got to do.
Well, I hear you. I think you're probably right. Here's what the agenda item says. Clarification of drainage requirements. It doesn't say order and it doesn't say plan.
Okay.
Of drainage requirements for the Meadowbrook Retirement Community Manufactured Housing
Okay.
Rental Community Development Plan Phase 1, located at, yada, yada.
Okay, well.
So we can
clarification-
discuss clarification of drainage requirements.
And the clarification is, as Charlie said, it shouldn't have said 3.5% increase in the discussion. That's it.
And
So the
developer
wait just a second. So the clarification is, it shouldn't say 3.5% increase.
I think though that and I agree with that, but the way that is worded, which I think is partially my fault. I wasn't aware
You
of all
weren't
this.
here.
No, but I talked to Charlie and I said clarification. They just need to clarify it. I think that we can't go back and change that under this agenda item, I don't think. I think that we've clarified it. Our intent is there's an error on that court order, but it needs to be reposted, and so we can clarify that development plan, or to change the
Well,
development
it's
plan.
not even an error in the court order, because the court order didn't even reference a date on the
I
development
didn't remember
plan.
the date, but there was one that the judge signed
Fine. Okay.
at court based on that. And I think that we have to repost that to say there is an error on that specific development plan that was approved on that date.
Okay.
And here's the
We may
error.
have to post something on that order.
Right.
But what this agenda item says is clarification of drainage requirements.
Right, and we've clarified it.
He's clarified it, and so maybe no action on this item.
No action on this
And
item.
an action at a future time.
I've got people lined up out there in that hallway that want to talk to me, and I'm going to
Exactly.
listen.
Well, they can talk. We can listen to them and clarify it, but we can't. I don't think we take action on this.
I don't think so either.
Okay, let's listen to it.
Yeah, let's hear 'em.
Okay, I've got your speaker identifications here. As we do this, let me remind you just to give your name and address. Limit your talks to your remarks to 3 minutes, and try to stay on task. And I know it's going to be hard because we've got things at 12:30 that we can't talk about, but that's what we're going to try to do. So we're going to talk about drainage requirements, clarifying drainage requirements. First speaker to register is Roger Gordon.
Good morning, Judge Kelly, members of this court. My name is Roger Gordon. I'm an attorney from Austin, Texas. I'm here today on behalf of all these folks that are standing out here, and I'm the attorney who successfully convinced Judge Patillo on Friday to overturn the variance, voiding the order from September 2019. Let's talk about what effect that action has. Picture a house of cards, y'all.
Well, wait a minute. What's this have to do with clarifying drainage
I'm
requirements?
going to explain very much. Judge Kelly, give you a sec. When the court voided the variance, the court essentially took out the bottom of the house of cards. And every order that subsequently was granted, including the item under consideration for number 17 here, that was approved in February of this year.
So you're saying order 968 is void?
That's right.
Okay, got it.
That's not the action the court took.
Well, he gets to say his position.
That's right. And Your Honor, Judge Kelly, fact of the matter is this is an example of why you measure twice and you cut once. You know, there's a lot of confusion right now, and just as what items are being considered and what actions the court can take. I'll tell you, it was surprising on Friday to see the Commissioner's Court repost this item just a few minutes after the hearing ended. I'll tell you, just as Ms. Evans and I disagreed prior to Friday's hearing about whether there was a Open Meetings Act violation on the September posting, the court ultimately agreed with me that there was an Open Meetings Act.
This item was not reposted. This item that we're talking about was posted early in the week.
That's right. Prior to
So
the court hearing.
you just made a statement that's not true, sir. You said we posted it right after the hearing.
I'm sorry.
We did not post it.
When Ms. Evans and I disagreed about the September post.
But we're not talking about that.
We're talking about drainage requirements,
I
Mr.
understand
Gordon.
that. I understand that. What I'm getting at is today, the court has a second item up. Commissioner Harris, I understand that we're taking that up at 12:30. I would argue there's also an Open Meetings Act violation with that. We'll touch on that at 12:30. The issue for today is, does the court need to clarify an order that contains a variance that was voided? And the answer is no. The court doesn't need to clarify anything because the variance that was granted, which increased the amount of drainage, I think the word reduction is a little bit confusing here. The subdivision regulations and the manufactured home regulations are different, and they're different for a reason, because general residential home construction is different from manufactured home construction. And the Commissioner's Court that preceded y'all, 2000, that adopted these manufactured home regulations, did so with a reason. And the reason is to comply with both state and federal law. And those laws require a slightly different analysis for a manufactured home community than a regular subdivision. And the Commissioner's Court from 2000 adopted a regulation that said drainage has to be reduced for a manufactured home community. Now it may be that this court decides to retake that issue up and put a different policy in place. Commissioner Letts mentioned that y'all got sued back in 2000. I'm not really familiar with that, but the fact of the matter is all we're here today about is an application of the rules. We're asking the Commissioner's Court to make this particular developer follow the same rules. As to the item for number 17, simply going to ask that the court take no action because no action is necessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the next speaker is Glenna Heaven. Did I say it right?
Yeah, well, Haven.
Haven, okay.
I'm not clear, right, but I'm Glenna Haven. My address is 189 Henderson Branch Road in Ingram, Texas.
Okay.
First and foremost, you don't know how much I appreciate this opportunity to actually address you on this matter, because until now I didn't have that opportunity. I'm a little bit confused on the limitations of my comments now that we are under agenda item number 17 as opposed to 25, and would appreciate a little bit of clarification as to keeping my comments to clarification only. I've been a resident of Kerr County for 18 years, the last 14 of which I have owned the property that is adjacent to this Meadowbrook development. As illustrated, you may have gotten something passed out to you of the development plan, and all around the development plan, I've highlighted in yellow for you with my property. So as you can see,
Just a second, I'm passing them out. You
Okay,
pass those down to them. And here's Tom, one of these for
It's
you.
got, yes, this one with the yellow
Don,
on the
pass
front, pictures attached to it.
Got an extra.
I made one for each of you.
Here you go.
With just some photographs attached to it. There it is.
Maybe I don't have it.
Everybody have it?
Yes.
And the yellow is what?
The yellow is my property. Okay? So as you can see, from Highway 27 along the entire eastern perimeter of the development and turning along the entire southern perimeter of the development is the property that I own. 41.3 acres, including a half a mile of Johnson Creek frontage. Living there for the last 14 years, needless to say, I've witnessed a lot. if you look at photograph labeled number 1, which is attached, that is an overview of the development taken from my back porch. I've witnessed firsthand on multiple occasions the raging power of water from both the runoff and from Johnson Creek flooding on these properties during heavy rains. Now, the lower half, and when I say the lower half, I'm referring to this southern half of this development closest to the river, was formerly a crop field that was grown each year. And the absolute lowest area along that entire stretch of Johnson Creek River Valley. And so every time that we had a heavy rain or storm, that field became a virtual lake. It actually inadvertently served as a retention pond for that property, where the runoff would sit for days and days and days before it was absorbed or evaporated. It didn't run off anywhere. Now, since the development has begun, the only substantial rain we had was in late May, as you know. And I was able to witness what happened during that period.
Ms. Heaven, I hate to interrupt, but your 3 minutes is up, and really this does not really pertain to what the drainage requirements should be.
Okay.
We appreciate you're obviously affected by this development, but we're really talking about what the drainage requirements ought to be.
I shouldn't have spoken yet. I had people yielding their minutes. I'm so sorry.
Well, thank you. Next is Valentina Solis.
She was going to yield her minutes to Glen Haven.
Okay, that's
And
fine.
we're going to wait.
Yeah, I think that to comply with the court's preference on item 17 versus 25, I'm certainly advising my clients that
25 is the one to
let's
talk
hold
on?
back on some of the items for discussion.
Okay. Ricardo Solis.
I was also going to waive my minutes to Glen Haven.
Okay. Sandra Fisher.
Sandra Fisher.
I would like to yield my minutes to Melanie Ellsworth.
Okay. Next one is Stu Walker.
Okay, I'll take a minute. I'll save the rest for.
You are?
Melanie Ellsworth, and I live at 230 Dowling Road.
Okay.
Just because we're talking about the drainage, I mean, that we're clarifying the drainage. And basically, no disrespect to Charlie Hastings, but he came in and said, I made a mistake. It should have been this. It wasn't this. If you want a good visual of what's been going on since his mistake, this is a new river, because the development that's over half finished, he just said, has pushed a lot of dirt next to Glen Haven's property, and it's all flooding down into the creek now. And it just, I mean, I am irate, and I'm not the only one. I'm representing a collective of a lot of people that live on the creek. And I mean, if the plan was wrong and you signed a plan that was wrong, you know, start over. Start over and make them put a new plan in and do it right. This is Johnson Creek. They proposed 200, eventually over 200 mobile homes this close to the creek. I mean, I passed out this paper if you want to share it with them. But I mean,
I passed out everything we had.
I can wait.
Yeah, I'll see it. We've got it.
So it's your responsibility to about the variance to protect the public health of Kerr County. It's on there and I circled it. And that's your job. That's what we elected you to do. And it just makes me livid that you won't, you know, that, and I'm not mad at you because I know you didn't know. You got this put in front of you and didn't realize what it was happening. But, I mean, and the other minutes were brought up about, I mean, I can say the septic issue for 1230. But I'm just saying, if you're talking about a mistake that was made in the drainage, that's what we're trying to clarify, and oh, by the way, that was a mistake, it should be this, wipe the project and make them start over and make them put in a plan from the beginning that follows the law.
Okay.
That's, I mean, I'll tell you the rest at 12:30.
Good summary.
Thank you, Ms. Ellsworth. Stu Walker?
I'm going to yield my minutes to Glenna Hayden.
Okay.
Okay.
And Carol Walker is signed up too, and that's my wife. And she's going to yield the minutes to Glenna Hayden.
Okay, got that. And the next on the list is Claudette Beard.
I yield my minutes to Melanie Ellsworth.
Okay. Charles Gregory?
I think that I only referenced section 1.25.
Yes, sir, you did. As a matter of fact, you are correct. So we'll save that one. And then the last one I have in this stack is Penelope Foster.
I yield my minutes to Melanie Ellsworth.
I'll stick at 12:30. I
Okay. So those are all the public inputs that we have on this topic, 1.17. And I think I've heard from the commissioners that they believe we should take no action on this at this time. Is that right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, so we will pass and move on to the next agenda item, which is 1.18. It's a public hearing on the county clerk archive plan for fiscal year 2021.
Anybody here to speak?
Anyone here to speak on behalf of the county clerk archive plan for fiscal year 2021? There being no one, that meeting is adjourned. We'll move on to 1.19, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action to approve and adopt the county clerk's annual record archival plan as presented. Ms. Downey.
I believe it's in the packets there. Excuse me. It's standard procedure.
You do this every year, don't you?
Correct. This year, on page 3 of the archive plan, you'll see the projects that are remaining thus far. I do have more books I need to get an estimate on, but over the next 4 years, 5 years, we're looking at about $75,000 just to archive the rest of the books. And then there's more to come. But anyway, for this coming fiscal year, I'd like to start to complete Project 5, which is the reverse index to deed records, and that will cost, the quote I received, $16,097.50. In this archive fund, I've requested the amount of $16,100, and this is on page 4. We have deputy clerk salaries that we can appropriate to this fund. FICA expense, group insurance, retirement, workers' comp. I'm sorry, basic life. And the total amount for this fund for fiscal year 2020 and 2021 will total $152,386.
But that's next year.
Correct, this upcoming fiscal year, correct.
Okay.
County clerk requests the Commissioners Court approve and accept this archival plan as presented.
So you're presenting a plan that's next year's budget?
Yes, this plan has to be presented in the public hearing, which we just held,
Okay.
and the Commissioners Court needs to adopt. We just primarily need to be in agreement about what we're going to use this money for.
So is this in the budget that we're looking at right now?
The current budget for 2020, 2021.
So it's in,
But it's a dedicated fund.
yeah.
Correct. And in order to use it, I have to ask permission.
I got you.
It really doesn't change anything, does it?
No.
I move for approval.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Blue, seconded by Commissioner Letts to approve the county clerk's annual record archival plan as presented. Any other discussion?
Question, Jackie, on the $16,097.50 for Project 5, is that included in the 152? Or
It
is that-
is.
Yeah,
It's the
it's at
top of that
16.1.
graph.
She rounded
So
it
you
off.
rounded up 16.1, okay.
Yes, sir.
That was it.
Okay.
Those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous, 5-0. 1.19, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action to approve and adopt, that's it. appropriate action to approve the contract between Data Preservation Services and the Kerr County Clerk and authorize the county judge to sign same.
This is the plan that we just presented, Project 5, totaling, the estimate is $16,097.50. And I just request that, I did present it to the county attorney. She's made no suggestions for changes, so I request the court adopt as presented and authorize county judge to sign same.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Moser, seconded by Commissioner Harris to approve the contract between Data Preservation Services and Kerr County. Any other discussion? Those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous, 5-0.
Thank you.
1.21, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action for the county clerk's fee schedule for fiscal year 2020-21 to be effective September 1, 2020 through September 30 of 2021. I think that's October 1, 2020 to September 30, 2021. Is that right?
Well, it's based on the ending period for this current year. And so there's no overlap. So next year.
Yeah, it's
Should be October.
fiscal year is October 1 to September
Right.
30. So
Right.
we understand.
Okay.
Should be October.
Well, there will be some gap though.
Well, we're talking
Because
about,
of the last year's, it ends on a weird date. It doesn't end properly.
Oh. okay.
Because of the way it had been presented to you.
Gotcha.
Anyway,
Okay.
so,
Okay.
as presented, there are no changes since
no
last
changes?
year. Yeah, everything's updated according to the Office of the Court of Administration and criminal case.
I'll move for approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Harris, seconded by Commissioner Baloo, to approve the clerk's fee schedule for fiscal year 2021. Any other debate, discussion? Those in favor, raise your hand. 5-0 unanimous.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about the tax anticipation note, or pass that to when we talk to CIP?
I put it on as Dr. just briefly because we needed to have this discussion in open court, and we can, Judge, I think it is the idea to have the CIP come and present in open court.
The CIP is meeting this Wednesday, and they're going to meet for every Wednesday
Right.
until they come before the court. And I forget the date. Is it late August, early September? I know they're planning to come. And what they want to do is come in and bring a detailed report to the court about what their recommendations are and discuss how we would finance it with these tax anticipation notes. But generally speaking, a tax anticipation note is a means that we can finance for up to 7 years. We talked to Dusty Traylor with, what is that, RBC?
RBC Capital.
Capital. And he's estimating that we could probably get interest rates somewhere in the 1.25% interest. And this would be, just as kind of a preview, this would be to buy the building down the street for the Public Defender's Office and some other properties that we're looking at, to be able to get those so that we'll have them, they'll be owned by the county when we take the bond issue to the people so they can see what we're trying to do on those properties.
Yeah, I think, my only concern is that, I mentioned this last meeting or meeting before, but maybe it wasn't real clear, is that I don't see how we can negotiate, which we've authorized the judge to do, until we know how we're paying for it. It goes back to the same thing.
Right.
And that will come clearer under executive session. So I think that, the sooner we can get the committee in here to report, the better, because I think we're at a standstill right now.
Well, I know they're meeting the 29th, the 3rd, the 10th, the 17th. So I think they're probably planning to be here towards the end of August with this, with their specific recommendations. And they're preparing a written presentation with substantial detail. Anything else? Then let's move on to item 1.23. Consider, discuss, and take appropriate action to approve the Witt O'Brien's LLC Emergency Purchasing Agreement for Grant Consulting Services for the Coronavirus Relief Fund Grant. Is Callie going to come in on that?
She is. She's right there.
Come on in. We don't bite.
Good morning.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kelly Reagan. Good man.
can take that off when you speak.
Yeah, while you're talking.
While you're speaking, you can.
Absolutely.
Just speak up so that we can hear you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I wanted to discuss today the Widow Ryan's contract. So recently, we obtained the Coronavirus Relief Fund grant to help with expenditures that pertain to COVID-19. This helps with PP&E, medical expenses, and payroll that pertains to COVID-19. It was in the amount of about $1.4 million. And all these expenses have to be incurred by December 30th, 2020. We would like to hire Widow Ryan's as a grant consultant to kind of help us brainstorm some ideas to kind of help us figure out how we can kind of spend these funds. And the maximum amount of this contract would be about $50,000.
Which is paid for out of the funds that have been, the grant funds that have been paid to us.
And so what's $50,000 and what's the potential money that we can get?
It's $1.4 million. That's the most we can get from this grant.
Okay.
We don't have $1.4 million worth of expenses.
No.
Right.
But these people are professionals. The city's using them. They're being used nationwide. And these are experts to help us be able to identify projects and expenses that would qualify to be applied against that grant.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve the contract with Widow Bryan LLC for the emergency purchasing agreement for grant consulting services for coronavirus relief
Second.
grant.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Letts, seconded by Commissioner Moser to approve retaining Widow Bryan for our consulting services for the COVID coronavirus relief fund grant. Any other discussion?
It's with clarification, the contract amount is not to exceed $50,000.
Not to exceed $50,000.
Not to exceed $50,000.
Yeah, we discussed this a couple weeks ago, didn't we?
Right.
Yeah.
They just got us the contract and
Okay.
county attorneys reviewed it.
And so has Tita.
Yes, the county attorney, yes, they've reviewed it.
Texas Department of Emergency Management, TEGM.
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? Those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Okay. 4-1. Item 1.24, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action concerning property on Southway Drive currently used by the county road and bridge. We can talk about that in executive session?
Some of it might need to be, or maybe.
Okay.
The property is for sale, and it hadn't been in the past, and so Kelly looked up everything in the tax records and what it's appraised for and so on. So if we need to talk about that, I've talked to the representatives at the church, and they are motivated to sell it, and it's at the appraised value. So.
Okay.
And this would
See
be
what everybody
used,
thought. Kelly thought it was a good idea. If you want to put some, add some input, Kelly, about where this would be a benefit to the county. And we've used it for years, and it's been no trouble at all, so.
This is one of the agreements for the storage of material. We currently have material that's out there. We also store equipment. It's not far from Ranchero Road. It's a good location for that Kerrville South area. It's 3.37 acres. It's ideal. We've used it longer than I've been here.
we got to have spots around the county.
Yeah.
And the price is really right, so.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll pass that to executive session. Approval agenda 2.1, pay the bills.
Morning. For Kerr County, we have $525,431. $525,436.81. For the airport, $3,320.44. Adult probation, $802.41. Fund 45, district clerk fees, $3,361. Fund 78, county clerk fees, $291.34. And Fund 95, 198, DA forfeiture funds, $191.92.
Move to pay the bills.
Second.
A motion been made by Commissioner Moser, seconded by Commissioner Harris to pay the bills as presented. Any discussion? Those in Those in favor, raise your hand. 5-0 unanimous. Budget amendments.
Good morning. Yes, we have 4 today. They're all line item transfers, the first 3 within their own departments. One is for non-departmental, 216th District Court and Sheriff's Department. The fourth one is between 2 different departments, non-departmental to Ag Extension Services for group insurance.
I move for approval.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Harris, seconded by Commissioner Baloo to approve the budget amendments as presented. Any further discussion? Those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous, 5-0. 2.3, late bills.
There are none.
Thank you. 2.4, auditor reports.
Yes, we're asking that you accept the report on the audit, internal audit from the tax assessor collector office.
I move for approval.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Harris, seconded by Commissioner Letts to approve the audit report for the tax office. Any other discussion? Those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous, 5-0. Monthly reports.
Yes, for June 2020, Environmental Health OSSF Monthly Activity Report, Director Ashley Batters. Animal Control Service Monthly Report, Director Reagan Gibbons. Fines, judgments, and jury fees collected, JP4, Bill Ragsdale. County Treasurer's Monthly Report, Tracy Salden. And Kerr County Investment Report for the quarter ending June 30th, 2020, County Treasurer Tracy Sullivan. I move for approval.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Commissioner Harris, seconded by Commissioner Baloo to approve the monthly reports as presented. Any further discussion? Those in favor, raise your hand. 5-0 unanimous. Court orders.
Judge, I wasn't here, so I didn't vote for you.
There's 2 sets.
I haven't looked at them.
We want to pass on that to 12:30?
Yeah, well,
Let's pass on that to 12:30. We can approve when we can reconvene. Okay, information agenda, status reports from department heads. None? 3.2, status reports from elected officials. 3.3, status reports from liaison commissioners.
Got a couple of things. Librarian Laura Bechtel is moving to a different location, so there's another librarian been appointed by the city. Laura did a great job over there, so need to applaud all that she's done. Second thing is the airport board has been working with TxDOT Aviation on the 10 additional T hangars, which we've looked at, reviewed, and we have money set aside for that. It's good news. The bad news is the estimated cost of those things have gone from $900,000 to $1.6 million because the way TxDOT Aviation has chosen to run the potential project. So airport board's going to come back to us, they need to, and we may just walk away from that whole thing. It's ridiculous what TxDOT Aviation is doing on how they're planning, doing the engineering. I think engineering that increased to $300,000. So anyway, just a heads up on that. So our 10 T hangars are in jeopardy of being paid for by the 90-10 grant like we looked at. So our 10% portion would have gone up a lot. So
Could we reduce the?
Could, but it's, it's the percentage of, it's the way they're contracting for this thing and doing the engineering is totally different than the way we did previous T hangars. So anyway, just a heads up.
Okay. Anything else?
Judge, just a comment on this, it goes to item, whatever it is. We will not be having the economic development update. Mr. Salinas is in South Texas, flooded at the moment.
Oh, goodness.
Oh.
We'll do that.
We told him to move.
We'll do that next week.
Yeah. Any other liaison commissioner reports? Okay, with that, then we're going to go into an executive session. We have several things to talk about, but I think we're going to talk about pending litigation, and we're going to talk about an update, well, I guess not an update on economic development now. And then we're going to discuss our contractual relationship with the local realtor and these projects that we're looking at possibly purchasing, and talk about the possible purchase of real estate. That's what we'll talk in executive session. It is now 11:12, and we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 11:17 in executive session. We'll come back to order. It is still Monday, July the 27th, 2020. It's about 12:30 in the afternoon, and we have an addendum to the agenda plus one item we passed from this morning. So I'll call them both at the same time. And the first one is item 1.17 on the agenda, which is clarification of drainage requirements for the Meadowbrook Retirement Community Manufactured Housing Rental Community Development Plan, Phase 1. And the item 1.25 is consider, discuss, and take appropriate action to grant a variance to the manufactured housing rental community regulations stormwater detention calculation requirements for the Meadowbrook Retirement Community Manufactured Housing Rental Community Development Plan, Phase 1. Everybody know what we're going to talk about? Okay, good. We have some more people turn in applications, forms to fill if you want to address us and make some statements to us. So if you want to defer your time, I've had several people ask about that. That's perfectly permissible. Just let me know who you want to defer it to, and then we'll add that 3 minutes on to that person. Just a little disclaimer as we begin this. I have a heavy juvenile docket at 1:30, and the county attorney, Ms. Stebbins, and I will be stepping out to take care of that. Commissioner Letts, who's a senior member of the Commissioner's Court, will then preside over this, and y'all can continue having your hearings, and I'll come back in if you're still going when I finish up my juvenile docket. And so with that, I'm going to call these in the order that I have them here in the stack. And Roger Gordon is the first one back on this one too.
Thank you, Judge Kelly.
We've already got your name and everything, so don't worry about that.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, I'd just like to point out here that the purpose of the variance process is to provide the Commissioners Court with an opportunity to hear from the property owner or the property owner's agent as to why the literal interpretation of the rules cannot apply to that particular property. It is the responsibility of the property owner or his agent to demonstrate to the court that there are special circumstances or conditions affecting their land such that the strict applications of these rules and regulations would deprive the applicant of the reasonable use of that land. I went back and read the September 2019 Commissioners Court minutes, and I was surprised because the applicant didn't present a case. The applicant or his agent didn't convince this court of any special circumstances that applied. It was the county's engineer getting paid the taxpayer dollars up there arguing on behalf of the applicant. And I would ask the court today to require the property owner to do the exact same thing that any other property owner would have to do if they came in seeking a variance from the county's rules and regulations. Prove up your case. Demonstrate that there's something more than a monetary hardship to justify the court waiving its own rules and regulations.
You can take your mask off.
Thank you, sorry. I appreciate it.
And by the way, the governor's order does allow you to remove your mask when speaking.
Thank you kindly. It may be that the court ultimately decides to grant this variance. It may be that the court ultimately decides to waive these rules or change these rules. I'd simply ask that y'all follow your own process and procedures. Kerr County is a law and order county. The law was established by this Commissioner's Court in 2000, saying that if you're going to build a mobile home community, you're going to have to reduce the amount of runoff that flows from that property. The order are the gentlemen that are sitting right here in front of us. The law has been set. Y'all are the order. I would ask this Commissioner's Court to please require the applicant to comply with the requirements under the variance regulations. Now, I will note, as a final point, and I think this agenda, it probably wasn't posted in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. The fact of the matter is this meeting started at 9 a.m. and it was 12:30 on Friday when this item was posted, tacking on an agenda item on the back of the meeting that started at 9 a.m. I don't want to be back in front of Judge Patillo on this issue. I think this is a matter that this Commissioner's Court and members of the public can resolve between themselves.
You want us to stop and go home?
I do. I think it's appropriate, and I think y'all should come back in a couple of weeks and hear this when the members of the public have the opportunity to participate.
Well, we're gonna set it for, we want to give the people that are here an opportunity to be heard. You've gone to a lot of trouble to be here, and we appreciate that. And that's not lost on us. I know what you want to move.
Yeah.
And I suspect just from talking to these folks that if the court's preference today is to table this issue for a couple of weeks, they'll be happy to come back in a couple of weeks and share their piece with y'all. I don't think anybody's going to complain if you say you're not going to get a chance to speak today because we're going to push this down the road a couple of weeks and let you guys come back.
Well, I know Commissioner Harris has something he wants to.
Well, I tried to get it delayed this morning, as you saw, and we couldn't do it till 12:30, and so that's my wish again. I'm going to make a motion to push this till next Monday, and that way it can be advertised in the paper, full transparency. Everybody up and down Johnson Creek that wants to hear this or have a say can show up, and that give everybody plenty of notice, and we can go from there. So that's my motion.
And I'm going to second the motion, but here's what I want everybody to understand. I've got to handle this juvenile docket. It's already set. I've checked with our court coordinator, and I think the only things we have are the routine things with regard to the state of COVID-19, the emergency disaster order that's entered, and then this would be the next item on the agenda, and I think we have the entire morning to do that, to hear it. So, any discussion about the motion?
I have a comment. You mentioned put a notice in the paper. I object to that because
well, I need to rephrase that, Commissioner. We're not going to put a notice, but it will be documented in the paper by the.
Have time for a report.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not us.
Okay. Thank you.
I need to rephrase that. Glad you caught that.
The West Kerr Current is what he's talking
You
about.
bet.
Well, we don't even have to have a motion, we can just pass on this.
Well, he
Right.
but he wants to continue the motion.
Right, and
Well-
we'll put it on next Monday's
Yeah,
agenda.
right.
We knew what you were going to do.
Right.
Okay. And I wanted a second to make sure that we get a discussion of it. What I think Mr. Gordon's asking us to do is to stop right now.
I think it'd be appropriate to give this matter a week. I said when I stood up earlier, measure twice and cut once. The county has already incurred significant costs as a result of what happened back in September. Giving it a week isn't going to change what's happening on the ground that much. If the court ultimately is going to grant this variance next week, then the court's going to do that. I think it's important to give the members of the public an opportunity to participate.
But I would like anybody that doesn't think they can be here next Monday and signed up, open mic, you can get up and say your spill. So if y'all just said come back next week, that's fine too. So
if anybody wants to speak.
I may or may not be able to be here next week, so I will. Judge Kelly, Commissioners, my name is Charles Gregory. I own property on Johnson Creek about a quarter mile downstream from the Meadowbrook development. The agenda item before us, as we've been discussing, is to consider an application. And I'm going to backtrack to this morning's discussion. I was surprised at how unclear all of you are about what the existing regulations are. And it's laid out very clearly in the minutes of the September meeting. All you got to do is go read those. It's laid out. It is not the state minimum. The existing regulations require a reduction in the runoff. And the variance is about allowing the runoff to be greater and up to the state minimum. This project is on Johnson Creek, one of the three major tributaries of the Guadalupe, about 10 miles downstream from its headwaters. An earlier, perhaps wiser court put in effect stronger stormwater regulations than the state requires. Maybe because they felt that this unique river system here deserves a higher level of protection, and wisely so. But today, this court wants to consider waiving those tighter restrictions. And I ask, why? Why would you even consider it? What reason can you possibly have? That item was approved at the September meeting. We know that the judge considered that notice inadequate and nullified it. I ask again, why do you want to make it easier for a developer to put such a project as this in place? What reason can there possibly be? I'd like to hear an answer, and I think all these people would. I petition you to correct the hasty action of last September's meeting and deny it. Deny the variance. Very simple. Thank you.
And Mr. Gregory, I'm happy to give you my answer why.
Yes, sir.
Because I don't believe it's legal to require people to detain more water than what state law requires. And state law says that we're not supposed to have any impoundment or diversion of water other than in its natural condition. And so when you go to zero, that is what the Texas Water Code says. And so I appreciate what the earlier court has done. I don't think that's enforceable.
That's not my department. I know that the regulations require a reduction in the runoff. If the regulations are invalid, I don't know, that's a legal issue.
Well, and the law that I'm talking about, I don't know if you're an attorney or not, but it would be an unconstitutional taking without due process law. To take somebody's property rights and say you're going to have to hold back this 20% additional water when they own the land and they're entitled to discharge the natural water as is. That's why we went to zero.
That's a lawyer's issue.
So that in the development of this land, no more water should drain off of that tract than did in its natural state before any development whatsoever.
I understand all of that, but I understand that existing county regulations for such a project require a reduction. If
I
that's
understand.
an invalid law, that's a legal thing.
But you asked me a question, and I want to give you the courtesy of an answer, is that we as a court, collectively, we feel like that if we can keep the drainage the way it is in its natural state and does not impact that creek or adjacent landowners, then that's the best we can do.
Again, I say that's a legal issue. Mr. Gordon can address it better than I can.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Who else wants to? Ms. Ellsworth, right?
Yes. So the goal is to keep it in the natural state.
Yes.
Not make a difference.
Absolutely.
So the fact that it's come in and made a difference, would that be a concern to you?
Yeah, it would be a concern.
Okay. So we have proof that that's happened because there's the land has been sloped so that all the water is now dumping onto somebody else's property. And I read earlier the commissioners meeting when that was brought up. One of you guys, I'll have to look it up, said it's illegal. You guys know that somebody can't slope their own property and dump all the water on somebody else.
That was probably me.
Okay, well that's happened.
I'm the son of a civil engineer. I learned it the hard way.
Okay, well that's happened. So whatever, within the legal realms that has passed, now we've got a problem.
Well, and I will tell you, the developer's not here, and I think Mr. Gordon brought that to everyone's attention. But I do know that the developer and their representatives have agreed with us that this needs to be a zero tolerance, no additional drain water come off that property than was in its natural state.
Okay, and I have one other issue, just as a concerned citizen reading over old minutes. It was brought up, this cluster versus not. Do you understand the difference between cluster and community systems?
On the septic system.
What's the difference with that? Does anybody?
You're talking about a system where everybody goes into one or groups of systems.
Right. So are you familiar with Castlecombe?
We are.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think the difference that you're looking for is ownership
right.
versus rental.
Right. So are you saying if a toilet is flushed on somebody that leases the land versus somebody that owns the land, is there any difference in that amount of septic that comes out?
The issue is, those rules are dictated by the state, not by this court.
Exactly, but the EPA guidelines are a community or cluster is a group.
We follow generally, and we do follow Chapter 285 you know,
Right.
who's state code.
Kerr County says it's on tracks, but I think there's a higher law, and we'll find out. But the EPA puts community and cluster systems in the same boat, and call it sewage is sewage. If you if you own or lease the land, let's call it what it is. If you're going to get around a loophole in the land saying we've got 200 homes that are dumping this sewage in this area, and that doesn't count because they're leasing the land, it doesn't make sense.
All I'm saying is that we enforce state law.
Right.
We can't go against state law.
Okay.
Well, I think you're presuming something. I'm hearing something in there that's not being said.
What?
Which is, you're talking about failure? Or are you
No.
talking about runoff? What are you talking about?
I'm talking
What
about
are you addressing?
the amount of, yes. I mean, if already we have an unusual large amount of runoff because of what has happened, isn't that going to affect the sewage?
Well, there's different kinds of systems, and the cluster is different than the community, so all that has to be taken into account. If you have an aerobic system versus a drain field, all of those things change it. So it's not just a question of whether all of them fall under EPA rules, but whether nobody wants any kind of leakage or seepage or failure. Nobody wants that. So they all have to be tested and approved and so on. So what I think I'm hearing you talk about is the fear of failure of those systems, not being kept up and so on, which we can't really address.
I think she's talking about the stormwater drainage added to that, the septic system drainage.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
water's water.
Right.
I mean,
It's all flowing into the creek.
exactly.
Right.
Everything, and I passed that out earlier. I don't know if you flipped through those pages, but I drew a picture of the slope of the land and the magnitude of this. And I mean, if it looks like a duck and smells like a duck, it's a duck. I mean, if it looks like a lot of sewage I mean, I know you have to keep
Well, what
the
do
lawn.
the neighbors all have?
Well, the neighbors have septic.
No, do they have drain fields? Do they have aerobics?
They have
Is it a
drain-
mixed bag?
They have drain fields, but you're talking about one house on 40
I'm asking,
acres.
everybody contributes to whatever it is.
May I contribute to that? I'm a quarter mile downstream. I built my house about 12 years ago. I was required to put in an aerobic system.
Aerobic, right,
I'm higher up on the hill.
right.
This big subdivision start with 102 units, lower on the hill, closer to the creek. They get to do beach field.
And
My question to you, why?
I'll just say Castlecombe is 30 homes on 9,000 gallon septic. This is 25 homes on 5,000, 25 homes on 5,000, 25 homes on 5,000. We're talking 5, 10, 15, 20. Then this phase 2 is another, we're talking 40,000 gallons of septic drain field within 75 feet of the creek. And if it's the law, it's the law. But I'm just saying, let's make sure. I mean, in 5 years, do you want a lawsuit that we've got E. coli in the creek and ruining Kerrville? I don't. I get in the creek every day. I've got grandkids that swim in it.
Well,
I don't want the
I
creek
understand
ruined.
your fear, but you can't base the acts of the court, this court or any court, on somebody's fear of what might happen, what maybe is going to happen. If it's within what the law says, and it is, then that's as far as we can go.
Okay.
This court is here to implement the rules of the state. We're not
Okay.
supposed to go and write extra laws for the state.
Okay.
You understand that?
I get that, but I'll just be blunt. This went up in the dark of night. Not any of us knew this was happening, and we kind of dug back and found out, you know what? It got approved and the address got left off. Well, what do you say? The judge ruled in our favor on Friday to say these people were not legally, they didn't have a legal right to do this because they didn't put the address. And that's what the Open Records Act is. So you can sense my nervousness over, are we really doing things right?
Well, there's no conspiracy with this court and any developer, if that's what you're suggesting.
Okay, it's just suspect. I don't know. I'm not
I can
pointing fingers
promise
at
you.
anybody. Okay.
Well, what's suspect?
What?
What's suspect?
What suspect? The suspect is the fact that this was not an open record. Nobody knew this was going on, and it's been voted on Friday that this was void. The variance was void. So if you're building a building and your foundation just got swept out from under you because it was void, what part of void do you not understand? They should have to start over and file new permits. And
But I guess my question is, you're saying that we did this secretly, what you just said. February 24th, the agenda item said, approve the Meadowbrook Retirement Manufacturing Rental Community Development Phase 1 located at State Highway 27, Hudell Hollow.
no, that wasn't what was.
No, that's when we approved it. The variance is what the notice was about. We approved it. It was plenty of notice that we were developing, going to approve this development.
When we went before the judge, what was presented to the judge on Friday that he agreed with us is the agenda items. They had 7 agenda items, and all 7 of them had out 5 acres on this land. The Meadowbrook was the only one that didn't have.
Ma'am, I'm not disagreeing. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the one in February that when we approved it.
Two different things.
There's 2 different things, and it was very specific on that agenda item that we approved the development plan. I agree the variance, it was vague, and it was thrown out.
Okay.
But don't say, what you just said was that we did this, and we approved this development in the dark of night. Well, that's not true. It's posted on an agenda with the date.
If the variance was void, is the plan void?
Talk to the judge. I can't answer that. I would say no.
So we've got a contractor going in and saying, I need to slope the land a certain way. Yeah, you can slope the land this way. Go ahead. Then you approve a plan to go ahead and.
We didn't talk about slope of the land.
That's what the variance is.
No, it was about
drainage.
Okay.
Which you're talking about, dirt work.
Yeah.
We're not into the dirt work. We just want to know how much runoff is going into the creek.
The fact that they moved a bunch of dirt on their property, and you said it in your minutes, it's against the law to slope your property in a way that you can't dump a lot of water on your neighbors.
You can't change the flow.
Can't change the exit point onto the neighbor's property.
Right, and that's happened. Okay, so what I'm asking is if the variance has now been saying, we gave them this variance on if that's void now, isn't everything else that's built on top of that need to start over? The judge said on Friday, let's do a do-over.
On the variance.
On the variance.
On the variance.
Right. But not necessarily everything.
Not the development.
On the plan?
See, if the state legislature changed the rules on how you file and what happens and how many days is required and so on. And if all that's done right, then it's done right.
We're trying to get the variance back to what we want it to be, which is 0 additional water on any neighbor. And no additional water into that creek other than what would flow naturally.
So what are you going to do now to get are you going to tell the developer to move the land?
No.
Wait, one is, there's 3 things here. One's where the water goes from one property to the other.
That
shouldn't change.
That changed.
That shouldn't change. Then the amount of water is the different thing. That's the variance. So hopefully it'll be 0 on what it was naturally. And then the third thing is the septic system and what that does to add to additional
And that's not
flow.
before the court today.
And that's not before the court today.
Right.
But so there's 3 separate.
But when we talk about this, if we get it to 0, they're probably going to have to put some kind of detention facility on their property to hold that water so that it doesn't get down to Johnson Creek until everything overflows.
Great.
Which would be the way it would be before they did any development. It'd be the same.
So they've got to resubmit the plan because it's going to have to change somewhat. They're going to have to do something different, right?
They'll have to do something different, but they don't have to resubmit anything.
They don't have to resubmit anything.
Okay.
The variance changes, which is what you said earlier.
We're trying to protect it so that nobody takes any more water than you would if the land were still in its natural condition. That was the variance that we intended.
And you don't want to go beyond that where you're capturing more than should naturally be running off, because then the creek runs slower and everything else, and then you don't want to get to that point. Some people have expressed the desire for that, and
then you're capturing other people's water.
Yeah, and you're using up their land.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I'm I'm about Johnson Creek. And I live in the country. I expect mobile homes to go in. I do not have a problem with the development. I'm happy they'll bring more homes to the area. If it was in the middle of nowhere, not on Johnson Creek, I'd be all over it. The fact that it's exactly on Johnson Creek, and this Kerr County has spent $63 million getting Centerprint Point off septic. You've got issues in Ingram getting them off septic. It doesn't make sense to put in 40,000 gallons of septic on Johnson Creek.
We don't have that choice.
But Ms. Ellsworth, regardless of where the property is situated, on a hilltop or on a creek, we cannot tell that landowner how to use that property. If they want to use that property, they have the right to use it. We can do certain regulatory things, such as we want to make sure that they comply with the drainage requirements, which means that nobody's going to flood their neighbor.
Which has happened.
Okay, well.
Now that becomes a civil issue, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And as far as the septic, which is not before the court today, that's something we'll take up when we get to that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else do we have that wants to address the court? Yes, sir?
Patrick Quinn, Houdat, Ohio, Ingram.
Okay.
It was my understanding from Mr. Bruce Ayler when he was commissioner of this court that I could not take my 60-some-odd acres and subdivide it into anything less than 12 acres to build a house on. Now, that's what he told me. I've not read the rules or regulations. I do know a neighbor down the creek had to come before this court and get permission from this court in order to sell, I believe, a 5 or 6 acre parcel to somebody out of their property. Again, now here we have homes going on half acres properties. Now, yes, they're for lease instead of for sale, but it sounds like to me what we want to do is make Kerr County like Kendall County down around Bernie, where everybody's living on top of each other, and that's not why I moved to Kerr County in 1995. I moved here to be in the country. Now, again, I cannot understand how I can't subdivide my property if I wanted to, which I don't, but this guy comes in and buys up a parcel and all of a sudden has houses sitting every half acre.
I can answer your question. The legislature passed rules that allows it.
Allows you or allows him?
Allows, we have no control over
landowners.
It allows the
landowners. In other words, the state of Texas knows more about Kerr County than this court does.
They think they do. They're the ones that passed the legislation that allowed for special rules for manufactured rental homes.
Did any of the representatives of this area vote for said legislation, or did they oppose it? Does anyone know?
Well, at the time,
look it up.
I'll look it up.
The current ones are no longer in office. The ones that were in office at that time, this was done prior to Andy Murr and prior to Don Buckingham being our representative.
So in other words, like I say, Austin knows more than this court.
Yeah, I don't like the rules that they do, and this one I think is contradictory, but
why doesn't this court stand up and say no one time? Just tell the state of Texas one time no.
Because we took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of Texas. That's why. We're here to follow the law.
Take the Constitution, shred it up, and throw it away. Y'all still gotta do whatever they say out of Austin.
If it's in state law and we don't do it, all they do is go to the judge. The judge can do it anyway because we can't stop it.
Let me bring up
the
first point but second point, again, I know the Trump administration has changed some of the rulings that the Obama administration did. But again, Bruce Ayler told me that the Johnson Creek had been determined by the U.S. Coast Guard to be a navigable waterway.
It is.
Which makes it subject to the waters of the United States rulings by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And I'm wondering if anybody has gotten permission from the U.S. EPA to put any additional waters in Johnson Creek on this development. Thank you.
We still have a motion pending to come back on Monday to do this, but I know I want to give everybody a chance that wanted to talk to us. If you want to talk to us, you can come talk to us.
I'll give you
Sure.
30 seconds.
You bet.
You just want to get that bandana down. I understand.
Breathe.
I see 5 guys there that really understand what's going on. You're talking about zero runoff. You're talking about neighbors' properties plus the creek. This will be a long process with litigation down the road, because every one of you knows as well as I do, when you pack ground, you take the natural habitat, you make it flat, even if it's at a slope, you pack it down, you know what happens. It's real simple. So civil engineers will be hired and all this kind of crap, and this is what's gonna happen, and we'll be in this freaking court for years.
We won't be in this one.
Well, yeah, it'll be civil, okay. I
But
understand.
you're talking about impervious cover. When you put down those hard surfaces and the water runs off it faster, that goes into the calculation. I don't do this. My dad was a civil engineer. He taught me enough to be dangerous. But that goes into the calculation. You can talk to any civil engineer and they can tell you exactly how much that drained off that before you compacted it and what has to be done to make it a zero drain.
I'm sure he'll have a civil engineer do that.
He does.
I'm sure he does. But I can tell you, it'll be more than zero, and there'll be civil engineers on the opposing side involved before this is over. Thank you.
Can you state your name for the record?
Robert Frazier.
Okay. Okay. Ms. Heaven?
Judge? I was wondering about the motion that's on the floor, and if we are actually going to address this issue today or table this for next week before I have anything else to say.
Okay. Well, then we'll call the question. Any more debate about whether or not we put this off to next Monday? Okay, so there's a motion been made by Commissioner Harris that I seconded to adjourn today and reconvene on Monday, August the 3rd, 9 o'clock in the morning. Those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous. We want to listen to you. So 9 o'clock Monday morning.
Good.
And the only items that are going to be ahead of you on this agenda, because I do get to write the agenda, will be our status report on how we're doing with COVID in the county, whether or not we're going to terminate the disaster order, which we're not, but I don't think we're going to do that, and then it'd be y'all.
And those others ought to take 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, by 9:15, y'all be on.
Thank you so much.
Okay, court is adjourned.